Chapter 873. Yin-Yang sucked in a breath of air. So that's how it is. We only need to wait for the starlight to shine, and the truth will be revealed. Sunlight and moonlight intertwined in the air, swirling slowly like a giant egg yolk. It was half yellow and half white, exuding a hazy, mystical glow. It was a sight to behold. The setting sun seemed to have lost its remaining luster and energy after emitting thousands of rays of golden light. The sky darkened as usual, without any signs of going against the natural order. It was probably only here, in the sky above the seven-star lake, that there was an additional mass of yellow and white. At this moment the sky above the seven-star lake was hazy. After the brilliance of sunlight and moonlight, starlight began to appear as well. This time, starlight descended as soon as it appeared. The starlight that filled the sky flowed through the entire starry sky and descended, merging with the brilliance of the sun and moon in the sky. The moment the three lights of the sun, moon, and starlight converged, the radiance grew brighter. A streak of silver light suddenly appeared at the end of the stream and shot straight down into the seven-star lake. Immediately after, the entire lake seemed to have transformed into a vast starry sky. As far as the eye could see, specks of starlight could be seen. A cloud of dense spiritual energy gradually rose from the surface of the lake. The spiritual chi was different from what he had seen the day before. It was now flowing with a bright silver luster, pleasing to the eye and relaxing the mind. Yin-Yang exhaled softly, feeling waves of comfort coursing through his entire body. Even he, who was used to seeing treasures of heaven and earth and breathing in the eastern purple chi, felt an indescribable sense of joy. This must be the true secret of the seven-star lake. Yin-Yang said, "Make the best use of your time to cultivate. I'm going down to take a look." Ji Lingxi asked blankly, "You want to go down to take a look while I'm cultivating? Why do you want to go down to take a look? Isn't it better to cultivate with me?" What Ji Lingxi and Yin-Yang felt was no different. Both of them could feel the surging spiritual chi and the high degree of assimilation after the spiritual chi entered their meridians. It was a comforting feeling, as if the energy had instantly turned into their own strength without the need for a lotus flower. This kind of cultivation method was simply too satisfying. It couldn't be any better. Ji Lingxi could not understand why Yin-Yang had chosen to leave at this moment. This was simply neglecting the essentials. "Little fool," Yin-Yang said, "you're focusing on the wrong point. Although this strange spiritual chi is a great benefit to us now, its source is the confluence of the sun, moon, and star rays just now." The origin of the confluence of the three rays shot directly into the seven-star lake, and only then did this spiritual chi rise from the seven-star lake. So the question was, why didn't this new spiritual chi directly descend from the sky like yesterday? Instead, we'll have to go through some trouble. Furthermore, today's spirit chi is extraordinary. It's even stronger than the eastern purple chi. This makes it even more precious. From this to that, could it be understood that there is a peerless treasure hidden in the seven-star lake? The combination of the sun, moon, and starlight is precisely because they shine on this treasure that it gives birth to this mysterious spiritual energy? Yin-Yang said, "If this is the case, does it not mean that we have to get our hands on this treasure to truly reap the benefits once and for all? Are you willing to leave this opportunity to those bastards?" A cold glint flashed across his eyes. "Instead of cutting off their path of retreat forever?" Ji Lingxi said worriedly, "This situation has probably been going on for many years. Compared to us, those local tyrants must have discovered it long ago. Why haven't they taken this treasure out yet? Does it mean that there's some kind of danger?" Yin-Yang said indifferently, "At least they're not dead, are they?" Ji Lingxi's words enlightened him, and he immediately understood. Yes, these people were not dead. This was Yin-Yang's biggest source of confidence and assurance. Just because they could not get it did not mean that he could not. After all, Yin-Yang's cultivation base was already unrivaled in this world, much higher than these people. The difference was like heaven and earth. If even they were not in danger, how could Yin-Yang's probing be in any danger? On the contrary, since he had confirmed that there was no danger, Yin-Yang would naturally give it a try. "All right," Ji Lingxi said, "if there's any danger, remember to call for me. I'm not being pretentious, just in case." Yin-Yang nodded and immediately turned into the wind. The sound of the wind quietly melted into the night sky, arriving at the spot where the three beams of light converged in an instant. Following the light that shone downwards, he dove straight down. Other than Ji Lingxi, no one else had the chance to notice such a maneuver. It was truly undetectable. Underwater. Yin-Yang dove all the way down, but he did not transform into his water manifestation immediately. It was probably because the water of the seven-star lake was not very deep, only a few hundred feet deep at most. It did not take him long to reach the bottom of the lake, where there was a thick layer of mud. The beam of light from the convergence of the three beams shone down along the direction of the mud. Yun Yang's mind raced, and with a single thought, he turned into a water droplet and seeped down along the mud. It was only about 30 to 40 feet before he came into contact with rocks. Even though Yun Yang had turned into a water droplet, he could not penetrate it. However, the beam of light had obviously stopped there and did not change its direction at all. It was obvious that its target was right below the layer of rocks. Yun Yang knew that it would be difficult to rely solely on his water manifestation, so he switched to his earth manifestation cultivation method. The cultivation method that originally belonged to Supreme Earth was abruptly activated by Yun Yang, and he instantly became one with the rocks beneath him. He then went to the edge and dove down along the cracks at the edge. The so-called earth and rock manifestations could only be individual pieces, or else the entire continent would only be a single piece of rock. Since they were not a single entity, there would definitely be gaps between them. As for Yun Yang's various cultivation methods and forms, they had all provided him with endless possibilities to dive deeper. After diving another 500 feet, there were no longer any giant rocks in the area he was at. What was left were only fine gravel and sand, as well as layers upon layers of underground water. So it's not that those people don't want to come down and look for me, but they are powerless. Even my water manifestation can't find anything, let alone them. Yun Yang thought to himself. This place is already 2,000 feet away from the bottom of the seven-star lake. What kind of expert would be able to reach here? Just the large stone layer alone is already a huge obstacle that would be difficult to cross. If he really wanted to go there, he would first have to drain all the water in the seven-star lake, then dig out the mud that was a few feet deep, then lift up the layers of rocks that were hundreds of feet thick, and pass through several layers of underground water that was blocked by hard soil. Finally, he would have to continue going down. There were still layers upon layers of large rocks in front of him. Moreover, even if he really managed to overcome all these obstacles, he still might not be able to find the key. Moreover, because of the destruction of the landscape, he might lose the opportunity to obtain the triple light spiritual chi forever. It was indeed a difficult plan to obtain the treasure. In this world, I'm afraid that no one else can come here except for me. At least, with the prerequisite of not destroying the landscape, there is definitely no one else. Yun Yang smiled in his heart, feeling quite proud of himself. However, he stopped smiling after that, mainly because he could not smile anymore. This was because he continued to descend for thousands of feet, but he still found nothing. If it were not for the fact that the energy of the triple light was still present, Yun Yang would have thought that he was looking in the wrong direction. If this goes on, will I directly drill through this continent? Yun Yang muttered in his heart as he continued to descend. Finally, the new layer of obstacle that he came into contact with was even harder than he had imagined. It was simply terrifying, moreover it was cold to the touch and vaguely familiar. This is stellar steel? Yun Yang could not help but be shocked when he discerned the truth of the obstacle. The lowest layer of obstacle that he had encountered so far was actually made of the incomparably hard stellar steel, and it seemed to be a complete piece of it. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the stellar steel was emitting waves of dense purple spiritual chi. There was no doubt that the treasure that shone and emitted spiritual chi from the triple light was within this stellar steel. His hard work did not disappoint him, and he finally found the place. Yun Yang was overjoyed, quickly searching for a gap in all four directions. After much effort, he came to an extremely depressing conclusion. There was nothing. The entire piece of star iron was like a gigantic iron ball. It had a circumference of several hundred zhang, and it didn't leave a single trace of its shape behind. There was no gap at all. It was a complete sphere. Yun Yang could not help feeling dispirited after confirming this point. He was still feeling smug just now, thinking that as long as there was a gap, he would be able to go down and obtain the treasure. Now he was immediately given a resounding slap. Yun Yang was not willing to give up, so he tried to transform into his metal form and merge with the stellar steel. As long as he could merge, he could naturally sneak into the stellar steel and leave with the treasure within. Yun Yang's wish was beautiful, but the outcome was far from ideal. Yun Yang's metal form could not merge with the stellar steel. After a long while, Yun Yang used all his manifestation powers, but no matter what method he used, he could not do anything to the stellar steel. Do I have to use brute force? Use the divine edge's sharpness to fight against the stellar steel? Yun Yang looked at his surroundings gloomily. It seemed like there was too little space left for him to perform. He was now a tiny water droplet. There was not much space for him to wield his saber. Yun Yang made up his mind. Emi? Aya, Come out and take a look at this stellar steel, see if there's any way to break it. Emmy's deific consciousness probed and expressed its helplessness after a while. Aya, can't break it? Yunyang grew increasingly frustrated. Emmy was the last resort that he could think of, but even Emmy could not do it. Aya, Emmy expressed its frustration, brandishing its claws as it tried to explain. This thing is indestructible, so I can only cut it slowly? Yunyang's frustration escalated once again. Did Emmy mean that even if he chose to break it with brute force, he could only cut it slowly with the sharpness of the divine edge? Just how thick was the star iron? How long would it take to cut it bit by bit? He really did not have much time left. Aya, are you saying that this isn't ordinary stellar steel? It's the essence of stellar steel, the heart of stellar? Yunyang was rather frustrated. Can't I just keep it in my deific consciousness space? This was Yunyang's wild imagination. Keeping it and cutting it slowly in his deific consciousness space would be the most convenient way. The problem was that the possibility of doing so was slim, at least that was what Yunyang thought. After all, Yunyang had tried it just now. Although this piece of stellar steel was only a few hundred feet in diameter, its density and weight were beyond imagination. At least, Yunyang himself could hardly move it. Unexpectedly, Emmy called out hesitantly after a moment of contemplation. Aya, I can try? Keep it in my deific consciousness space. Yunyang was stunned before he was overjoyed. Let's try. For the first time, Yunyang mobilized all of his deific consciousness energy in a way that pushed him to his limits. Emmy exerted all of its energy and channeled it into Yunyang as well. Then both Emmy and Yunyang felt dumbfounded. There was a loud boom. The piece of stellar steel actually swayed a little. However, it only swayed a little, it did not actually lift it. As for Yunyang's deific consciousness energy, it had been completely drained just now. He floated in the water in a daze, unable to regain his senses even after a long while. Emmy was in a daze as well, its originally dark green leaves seemed to pale in comparison. At the same time, the radiance of the three combined lights disappeared. Yunyang guessed that it should be daybreak now, which was the next day's dawn. Yunyang calmed himself down and recovered a little. How terrifying. The pain that almost tore his brain apart still lingered in Yunyang's mind. This thing could not be opened or moved. What should he do? Could he really return empty-handed after entering a treasure trove? Yunyang pondered for a long time before an idea struck him. That's not right. I'm afraid the amount of energy needed to move this iron ball is far more than the weight of this iron ball. Right now, it's almost like it's connected to the entire mountain range and stuck underground. If I cut open the surrounding areas and separate the stuck parts, then it'll truly be an iron ball with only star iron. I believe it'll be much easier that way. Compared to being stuck up, down, left and right, it's no different from moving these mountains into the deific consciousness space at the same time. It's reasonable that I can't move it. Yunyang made up his mind and focused on recuperating. After a while, the divine edge emerged quietly and sliced its surroundings inch by inch. Big chapter, first chapter today. The pace has been a little slow these few days. It's true that I've scrapped the outline of the bound of universe. I feel that the entry point isn't right, it's too much related to Tianxian. After writing about the secular world for so long, I don't really feel like writing anymore. So, after thinking about it for 2 days, I want to redesign the outline of the bound of universe. However, I still don't have a clue about the problem. Therefore, the pace of these few chapters has been slowed down. However, I've thought it through today. I might as well finish writing the secular world and take a few days off to think about it. Chapter 874. Ji Lingxi waited quietly above the lake, but Yunyang did not come out even when the sky started to brighten. A whole night had passed and he still had not come out? The surface of the lake had been calm during this period of time, without the slightest ripple. It was eerily quiet. There was a living person down there. Where had Yunyang gone? Ji Lingxi could not help but panic when Yunyang did not appear even when the sun rose. Could it be that he encountered danger and was eaten by something hidden here, such as a big fish? Thinking of this, Ji Lingxi jumped into the water without another word. It was a pity that she did not find any trace of Yunyang after swimming a few rounds at the bottom of the 7-star lake. She could not help but panic. He had clearly gone down, so how could he not be found? She came up to take a breath of fresh air, then went down to continue her search. Ji Lingxi stayed in the lake for a whole day, searching for Yunyang, but there was still no sign of him. Finally, the dozen or so people who lived in seclusion came over to ask about him. Miss, has Lord Supreme Cloud gone down to explore? TSK, we've gone down to the bottom of this lake many times. Although we didn't find anything, it wasn't dangerous either. Why is there no one else? This is strange. Alas, could it be that Lord Supreme Cloud has been cursed by heaven? This is really hard to say. What do you think we should do? Alas, this is hard to say. Ji Lingxi was flustered. She was already in a state of panic. When these people saw that Yun Yang had gone down and did not come back up, they began to gloat over his misfortune. The few of them decided not to leave. They stood by the lake and watched as Ji Lingxi went down to search again and again. Every time she came up, she would offer a few fake comforting words. They would not be able to find fault with her on the surface. At least they did not give Ji Lingxi any room to vent her anger on them. However, the gloating expression on his face was clear as day. As time went by, Ji Lingxi's anger rose from the bottom of her heart. Suddenly she exploded. Do you think you're safe just because you're on the surface? Do I need a reason to kill all of you? Do I need one? Do I not? It was indeed unnecessary. Even if Supreme Cloud dies, it's not your turn to gloat over his misfortune. Die all of you. Ji Lingxi had flown into a rage and was about to kill. With a single move he killed 4 of them. Then, without stopping, he went after the remaining 7 with his death. She was depressed, full of grief and indignation, and had nowhere to vent it. Coincidentally, these people were beside her, fanning the flames and taking pleasure in her misfortune. How could she care about her demeanor? Who gave you the courage to mock Supreme Cloud in front of me? Do I really look like I have such a good temper? Ji Lingxi's eyebrows shot up as she went on a killing spree. It only took a moment for the 11 men to be wiped out. Speaking of which, these 11 people were courting death. It was probably because they were too engrossed in the cultivation atmosphere of this place that their temperament was far from matching their cultivation. They did not have the brave heart of a martial artist, and they did not have the sophisticated will of a wise man. They were like flies trying to gain personal gains, rashly provoking a peerless expert. How could they not die? How could they not die? Since the appearance of the man who said he would watch his family die, Ji Lingxi's murderous intent had already surged. She wanted to kill these people right away. However, Yun Yang did not say anything else. Only then did Ji Lingxi suppress her murderous intent. She did not expect these fellows to be so blinded by greed that they would jump out to gloat after escaping death. It was like a cat licking the tiger's nose. They were the most suitable candidates for seeking death. With the last bang, the last man died under Ji Lingxi's palm. A small, fair palm slapped out forcefully, sending the man flying into the air. He spun more than 100 rounds. His neck and head had to spin a dozen more times before his head was sent flying with a slap. His body fell into the 7-star lake. While his head whizzed all the way to the other side of the mountain, Ji Lingxi's murderous intent was still surging all over her body. Her eyes were bloodshot, a clear sign that her anger had yet to be extinguished. She was carefully calculating if there were any survivors. Fortunately, there was a splash on the surface of the water. Ji Lingxi quickly turned her head to look in the direction of the sound. She saw Yun Yang floating on the surface of the water tiredly, swimming towards the shore with great difficulty. It was as if he had just gone through a great battle. He was exhausted and could barely move. Ah! Ji Lingxi could not help but let out a cry of surprise or joy when she saw this. She dashed over and lifted Yun Yang up from the water, only to realize that Yun Yang was truly devoid of energy. His face was sallow and his condition was unprecedentedly dispirited, as if his body had been hollowed out. What happened? Shut up. Get me up quickly. Yun Yang was devoid of energy, but his tone was as arrogant as ever. Without another word, Ji Lingxi grabbed Yun Yang and dashed ashore, like she was carrying a large salted fish. Her mood had not only turned from sorrow to joy, but she was also elated and overjoyed. After all, as long as he was still alive, everything was negotiable. Even if his body had been hollowed out, he could recover with some nourishment. When did you come up? When you went on a killing spree. I had just killed 4, then why didn't you say anything? If you had, I wouldn't have killed them. I was afraid that you would be happy to see me safe and sound and not kill them. Ji Lingxi blushed. Who cares about your thick skin? A moment later. What happened to you? Why are you so tired? Can't you recover after such a long time? It's a long story. Yun Yang sighed and began to describe his experience in detail. After all, he had emptied his entire cultivation base twice in such a short period of time. Anyone would have been dispirited and drained of energy. You've kept it? Ji Lingxi's eyes shone. Let me see. Cough, you can see it yourself when I put you into the space later. I really can't take it out now. Yun Yang's lips quivered. It had taken a lot of effort to collect this piece of stellar steel this time. He had almost died in the water because of this piece of stellar steel. Now that he thought about it, the lingering fear still lingered in his heart, making him shudder. I don't want to go in and see. Ji Lingxi snorted, her face flushed. What? Yun Yang was curious. Forget Emmy, just the fact that the few whiteys were jumping around in the space had already proven that his deific consciousness space would have no problem storing a person. Chapter 875. Ji Lingxi blushed and said angrily, none of your business. What do you know? She stomped away. Yun Yang was speechless. He did not know that Ji Lingxi was actually thinking, wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wants once he enters his deific consciousness space? See whatever he wants? In the deific consciousness space, he's omnipotent. Even if it's my body, my face, my... What's more, what's the difference between entering his deific consciousness space and letting Yun Yang enter her body? How could that be? I'm not going in. I'm not going in this lifetime. What's more important than a girl's modesty? The more she thought about it, the more she felt that Yun Yang was abominable. He had violated a girl's dignity. She could not help but turn around and scold him, pervert. Lecher. Pervert. Yun Yang, you're too filthy. Yun Yang was speechless. What did I do? What did I say? How am I a pervert, a filthy person? Why didn't I know? Where did this come from? Yun Yang's deific consciousness had suffered serious damage this time. He had to recuperate for 3 days before he managed to recover half of it. During these few days, even without the star iron as a guide, the formation of the 7-star lake continued to operate as usual. Every night, the power of starlight would still descend from the sky, and the atmosphere was exactly the same as before. However, Yun Yang had long understood that the night of the full moon would no longer be the same as before. But no matter what, this place is still a paradise that can aid in cultivation. Yun Yang sighed, lost in thought. He then used the 9 heavens dictum to let Shui Wuyin send a message to the 4 noble young masters, Fang Mafei, Bai Yixue, Lao Mei, and even Yun Xiaoyao. This realm was the most suitable place for them to improve. Yun Yang was only relieved when he had informed all the people he was familiar with. After resting for a few more days, he finally felt refreshed and rejuvenated. Shall we go? All right. During these few days of recuperation, both of their mystical cultivation skills had been elevated to their current peak, or perhaps the limit of what this world could bear. If they were to forcefully break through, they would be hated by this world first. On the other hand, they only needed a thought to activate their bodies, and they would be able to immediately trigger a celestial phenomenon. No matter how you looked at it, with the cultivation these two people currently possessed, they were no longer suitable to stay in this profound sky continent. In other words, the two people's cultivation had long surpassed it, but they had been deliberately suppressing it. Now, it had reached the point where it was difficult to suppress it. Once we reach the bound of universe, it doesn't matter if we're still together and not separated. But if we were to separate, Yun Yang reminded her, remember what I said. Be careful and think before you act. I'll remember that. I'll definitely be careful. Ji Lingxi seemed to sense something as well. She lowered her head subconsciously and did not speak for a long time. He seemed to be thinking about something. For a moment he was lost in thought and stood rooted to the ground. Yun Yang did not understand what the girl was thinking about at this time. It was very strange. Kiss me. Ji Lingxi recalled how Yun Yang had kissed Chengguan Lingxiu before she left. She could not help murmuring softly, yearning and anticipating what Yun Yang had said. What? Her words were exceptionally muffled, her voice low and abrupt. Yun Yang could not hear her clearly at first, so he asked instinctively. Ji Lingxi was enraged at once and said, I said, you're a pig. Was a girl's dignity something that could be violated? Yun Yang rolled his eyes at once. Oh, women are so hard to please. I don't even understand what's going on. You women are always like this, it makes me feel helpless. Ji Lingxi's eyes darted around before she suddenly roared, I said, I asked you to kiss me. Are you deaf? She sprung up abruptly. Hugging Yun Yang, she pressed her red lips against his. Their parting was imminent. She could no longer care about a girl's shyness. Dignity and reputation were nothing in front of the person she loved. She did not care anymore. Yun Yang finally understood. Looking at the alluring lips before him, his heart throbbed as well. Without thinking, he kissed her. He thought to himself, being ordered to kiss doesn't seem to be too much. I seem to have forgotten something. Just as their lips touched, a beam of red light moved abruptly. Boom. Yun Yang, who was known as the world's top supreme cloud and supreme wit, was flung hundreds of feet away. He hissed through gritted teeth in midair, "I knew I'd forgotten something." Fortunately, Jilingxi was the one who took the initiative this time, so Yun Yang's injury was not serious. However, he had rested for half a day. Jilingxi's expression was dark as she mumbled to herself. Who was she cursing? Yun Yang was very curious about the stellar steel ball that had been kept into his deific consciousness. The stellar steel that had reached the level of stellar core was already an extremely rare and precious item. What could be hidden within it? Keeping the stellar steel ball into his deific consciousness, Yun Yang was initially rather pleased with himself. He thought that the item that had entered his space was like a piece of meat on a chopping board that he could do whatever he wanted with it. In reality, however, Yun Yang grew more and more discouraged. Yun Yang had spent half a day racking his brains and using all his mystical treasures, but he still could not break the outer layer of the stellar steel ball. Compared to before, the divine edge could be unleashed to its fullest and could cut 5 feet deep with a single slash. The effect was obvious. However, the moment he pulled the saber out, the 5-foot-deep gap had healed instantly. It was completely healed. The result almost made Yun Yang's eyeballs fall out of their sockets. Was this still the stellar steel? Steel? Since when did steel have the ability to heal itself? And so quickly? Even if it was the stellar steel that had settled to the highest level, the stellar steel core should not have such a metamorphosis. Yun Yang then cultivated his manifestation powers, the endless divine art. He tried again and again, but there was still no improvement. Finally, Yun Yang focused his manifestation powers on the divine edge, but there was still no progress. Even when Yun Yang cultivated the endless divine art and performed the saber-tooth destiny with all his might, it was to no avail as the steel ball recovered instantly, despite causing more damage to it. Even the combination of the divine edge, the saber-tooth destiny, could not do anything to this steel ball. Yun Yang was at his wits' end, helpless. After Yun Yang's many fruitless attempts, Emmy tried wrapping the steel ball with its green vines and studied it for a long time, but it still looked extremely dejected. There must be something good inside, but why can't I break it? Emmy finally came to a conclusion. The effect of the combination of the saber-tooth destiny and the divine edge was, in fact, exceptionally obvious and effective. It was just that Yun Yang's cultivation base was still too shallow. If he could advance to the 6th stage of the endless divine art and evolve the divine edge at the same time, he might be able to break this steel ball. Yun Yang was rather dismayed. He was only at the 4th stage now. It was getting harder and harder to advance to the next level. When would the 6th stage be important? Chapter 876. Furthermore, what the hell did that probably mean? Did it not mean that it was still possible that it could not be broken at that stage? Forget it, it was better to have hope than none. Taking 10,000 steps back, this thing had already landed in his divine sense space, and no one could take it away. Although it was difficult to improve the mystical skill, there would be a day of success. The future was long, the future was long. Thinking about it, Yun Yang finally let go of his throbbing heart. He was no longer anxious. 3 days later. Both of them stood at the peak of the mountain. Are you ready? Yes. What about you? I'm ready as well. Once he spoke, both of them fell silent. Are you really not going back to take a look? I'm not going back. It's better not to see each other. This world is almost the result of your blood, sweat, and tears. I thought that you'd only leave after it's truly unified. My goal has never been to unite the world. Then what is it? My goal is to bring my brothers back to life. This has been my wish ever since the disaster that day. It has never wavered. There are many more unsolved mysteries in this period of time. I hope that we can solve them all when we reach the bound of universe and have a smooth journey ahead. Let's go? All right. For a moment, both of them channeled their mystical skills at the same time. 2 massive auras that had been suppressed for a long time surged into the sky. Waves of milky white brilliance suddenly overflowed from their bodies like stars. A radius of hundreds of feet was filled with dreamy colors that were infinitely beautiful. 2 powerful auras shot straight up into the sky, forcefully charging into the clouds, displaying their might that reigned supreme over this world. It was obvious that they were summoning something at this very moment. In the sky, the sparse white clouds slowly disappeared, and the sky was clear for thousands of miles. However, the cloudless sky only lasted for an extremely short period of time. A moment later, the unexpected dark clouds rushed over like tens of thousands of galloping horses. The endless sky also gradually sounded with the muffled sound of thunder from far to near. At this moment, the vast might of the heavens enveloped the entire profound sky continent. There was no place it could not reach and no place it could not hear. At this moment, everyone on the continent lifted their heads to look at the sky in shock. This apocalyptic scene that seemed like the end of the world could be said to be rare in both ancient and modern times. The sky full of dark clouds, starting from the edge of the sky all the way to the top of his head. It really only took a moment. One had to know that the distance between them was tens of thousands of miles. It was definitely not a short distance. The speed of the dark clouds was incredibly fast. Even when Yun Yang's cloud manifestation was moving at its highest speed, it was not as fast. The endless dark clouds in all directions were like the most disciplined soldiers who had heard the highest order of summons. In the blink of an eye, all of them gathered in the sky. From the initial clear sky to the dark clouds that covered the sky, one couldn't even see one's fingers in front of one's face. From start to finish, only a few dozen breaths of time had passed. Over the course of the year, there had been several such incidents. However, the previous few incidents were not as grand and unprecedented as this one. On the peak of Seven-Star Mountain, the wind howled and howled. Countless towering trees that had been planted deep in the mountains for many years were uprooted, swaying and flying to who knew where. Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi stood on the peak of the mountain, unmoving. Their eyes were shining with curiosity. The Bound of Universe. We are coming. All along, the Bound of Universe had been a mysterious place to cultivators born in the Tianshan continent. There were very few legends about the Bound of Universe that had been circulated in the mortal world. Now, this mysterious world was about to be fully opened up before the two of them, allowing them to experience it firsthand. The dark clouds in the sky grew thicker and thicker. Thunder and lightning began to wreak havoc high up in the sky. The atmosphere was eerie. The densely packed bolts of lightning interweaved to form a web of lightning in midair. The intense light blinded one's eyes, making it difficult to look straight at it. The continuous rumbling of thunder seemed to have become a rhythmic ancient war drum, ringing incessantly layer by layer. From far to near it was deafening. After a while, a torrential downpour poured down like the Milky Way had been breached. Suddenly, two gigantic eyes appeared in midair. One was looking at Yun Yang while the other was looking at Ji Lingxi. Although both of their cultivation base was profound and had long been at the pinnacle of this world, they had experienced the so-called ascension and transcendence after all. However, they were still unfazed, quietly waiting for the subsequent changes. It's said that when demons become immortals, they have to be struck by lightning. Only by going through the baptism of lightning can they transform and improve. Ji Lingxi's gaze was tinged with fear. Will we be struck by lightning as well? Yun Yang said uncertainly, it can't be, right? Before his words echoed in the air, two bolts of lightning had already struck down, aiming straight for the top of both of their heads. Ji Lingxi shrieked when she saw the situation. Her so-called composure were nowhere to be found. With a loud boom, both of their hair had turned into a messy mess at the first moment of the baptism of lightning. However, this was only the beginning. Bolts of lightning struck relentlessly, growing thicker and thicker with different hues. In the beginning, the lightning was bright white, similar to the thunderbolts that usually occurred on rainy days. Later on, it slowly turned red, purple and various other colors, each possessing its own power. Both of them had no experience with such a baptism of lightning, nor had they seen anything similar. They had not even heard of any related legends. Therefore, at this juncture they had no concept of avoiding or defending themselves. They were even afraid that it would be bad if they managed to avoid the lightning. Therefore, the two novices stood there dumbly, allowing themselves to be baptized by the lightning without moving an inch. They could only circulate their cultivation base to protect themselves. Ji Lingxi was truly unscathed. She had the protection of the red light and was impervious to all tribulations. The impact of the lightning on her was at most like a tickle to her. It could not even be considered a tickle. The tickling sensation came from the weaker ones that could not penetrate her self-defense force, so the sensation was naturally minimal. As for the stronger ones, they were eliminated by the red light directly, so of course she would not feel anything. Yun Yang, on the other hand, was in a miserable state. Passively enduring the lightning strikes, relying only on his self-defense force to defend himself, it was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. After holding on for a moment, his physical body began to falter. Then he was struck from head to toe until his flesh was lacerated and charred. He did not look like a living person. Chapter 877. He went through the outline a few times. He overthrew it and overthrew it again and again. He was extremely vexed. Finally, he thought of a creative idea, but he hesitated. Because this creative idea was enough to support a new book, he hesitated on whether to write it. Ahem. Finally he made up his mind. The future could be left in the future. He should write it first. He had taken leave for the past few days and attended the Writers' Association's meeting. He came to Inner Mongolia. To write the outline he often skipped classes and meetings. He had already left a deep impression on the leader. He was not having a good time and was always absent-minded. Who knew what he was thinking about? Without further ado, it's finally done. I'll fly home the day after tomorrow. Dansu, tomorrow night, which is the 30th, we can resume updating. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Have I always been very hardworking? Do you want to give me a wave of votes to encourage me? Finally, I'll say something very serious. I haven't updated for a few days. I really miss all of you. I feel like there's something missing in my life. Thankfully, I'll be back tomorrow. This time I feel like my eyes have lit up. Hee. Chapter 878. Yunyang could only feel himself floating, his body completely weightless. His deific consciousness was blurry and he did not know where he was. However, there was a solemn and dignified voice that kept echoing in the surroundings. The heaven and earth are black and yellow, the universe is barren, the lower realms commoners come knocking on my door. The way is the way, there is no hesitation. The country has its laws, the heaven has its rules, the way has its path, the way has its rules. The heaven and earth are heartless, the people are limitless. Keep your heart and mind, it's inauspicious to go against it. In the martial world, the strong is king. Do not indulge in lust or lust, those who go against it shall be hurt. In the martial world, heaven will pay, good will be rewarded, evil will be punished. The ruler is above, do not think and do not measure. The words were repeated over and over again in his mind for a good 70 to 80 times. In the end, when Yunyang felt that he could recite it backwards, another solemn voice came unexpectedly, entering the bound of universe, the ruler is free to soar. The heavens' rules are in your heart, you shall not go against it. Disobey, you shall die. Don't blame me for not warning you. Then Yunyang felt himself being lifted off the ground, falling rapidly like he was carrying 1,000 caddies. He did not know how high up he was in the sky. Falling so quickly, it would be fine if he was injured, but he would not fall to his death just like that, would he? Yunyang tried his best to gather spiritual qi to lighten his body and decelerate to reduce the speed of his fall, but it was all in vain. The spiritual qi in his body, which had always been at his command, was now completely sealed, unable to be mobilized at all. Even Emmy had lost contact with him just like before, as if it did not exist at all. If he had only fallen at a high speed, Yunyang would still have room to maneuver despite his precarious situation. However, the thunder and lightning that kept rumbling around him became the last straw that broke the camel's back. Bolt after bolt of lightning struck him with perfect accuracy. His entire body was enveloped in an excruciating pain, as if he was being torn apart. Under the continuous and escalating assault of the pain, Yunyang could not help but faint. Boom! Yunyang's body landed in a dense forest like a meteorite. The entire ground shook 3 times as a certain someone fell to the ground. Dust billowed into the sky, covering the entire area. Yunyang's body sank deep into the soil like he was burying himself, unable to see the light of day. After an unknown amount of time, Yunyang slowly woke up. It was one thing for him to regain his consciousness, but the fact that he could not see his own fingers and that his nose and mouth were suffocating were reminding him that he was currently buried in the ground. Yunyang dared not delay as he tried his best to circulate the spiritual qi in his body. If he wanted to break out of the ground, he had to at least use the earth manifestation power. It would be a great irony if the 9 supremes and 9 elemental powers were to perish in the ground due to suffocation. Just as Yunyang took a breath, the spiritual qi in his dantian responded like a tsunami. A massive, unstoppable force carried Yunyang out of the ground with a loud boom. Yunyang was completely unprepared for the sudden turn of events. He was still stuck in the fear of not being able to circulate his spiritual qi, falling freely from a high altitude and being buried deep underground. His best plan was to be able to circulate a portion of his essential qi or turn into the earth manifestation to support himself out of the predicament of being buried deep underground. If he could not even do this, it was not impossible to contact Emmy and ask it to provide him with a portion of his life force to avoid the situation of dying knowing about it. Unexpectedly, the circulation speed of his spiritual qi was more than twice as fast as when he was in Tianshan continent. Although it was only a thought and a breath of qi, he was able to escape the shackles of the ground and see the light of day once again. Although Yunyang was free, the doubts in his heart grew. He could not even circulate a single strand of spiritual qi when he fell just now. How could he suddenly improve by leaps and bounds when he woke up? What was going on? Yunyang, who was in midair, lost his balance, which was a rare occurrence. He shot out horizontally and then shot up into the sky like a cannonball. His movement defied logic, stirring up a cloud of dust. Poof! Yun Yang's chi dissipated and he returned to the ground. However, he realized that the ground he was standing on seemed to be a little soft. Looking down, he could not help but be shocked. The ground was filled with piles of fallen leaves that were several feet deep. Furthermore, they were all leaves that had just fallen and had yet to rot completely. Yun Yang's doubts grew. What kind of tree could shed so many leaves in one season? This should not be the case. If it had been more than a year, they would have rotted long ago. How could they be so fresh and wilted? When he lifted his head and looked around, he was shocked once more. Where am I? This was a dense forest, the kind that was deep in the mountains where no one would ever tread. A place like this should be an area where plants and flowers grew the most luxuriant. However, when he looked out, all he could see was a scene of wilted yellow. It could be said that the entire place was dead silent and withered. It was true. As far as his eyes could see, be it the plants or the towering trees, they were all wilted. There was no sign of life, not even a hint of greenery. In spite of this, the massive tree trunks were still standing on the ground, the branches still sticking out. What's going on? Why are the trees all dead? Yun Yang looked around, unable to comprehend the situation. With his eyesight, he could tell that these trees were still alive and thriving 2 to 3 days ago at the latest. Some of the branches still had signs of healthy sprouts, but they were all withered now. Under such circumstances, they would have been blown away by the wind even if it had been more than 2 days. However, here came the puzzling question. What could have caused these trees to wither in such a short period of time? Yun Yang tried to move his body to make sure that the explosion just now was not a coincidence. Only then did he stand up and move his body a few more times to make sure that there was no discomfort in his body. Instead, he was more agile and his vital chi flowed energetically. He was in a state that he had never been in before. Deep in thought, he walked to a large tree and extended his hand to support it, murmuring, "What's going on?" Suddenly there was a poof. Just as he touched the tree with his hand, the tree, which was so thick that it would take at least a dozen people to wrap their arms around it, suddenly turned into dust with a bang and fluttered down. Yun Yang retracted his hand as if he had been electrocuted, dumbfounded. Just now I didn't use any spiritual energy in my hand. Besides, even if I used a considerable amount of cultivation, I could indeed smash this tree into powder, but it seems that I can't do it in such a state where there's no moisture at all. How could I have such a powerful being? Today was probably Yun Yang's day of shock. Unexpected situations came one after another, one after another. As the huge tree suddenly turned into dust, it was as if a signal horn had been blown. All the trees in the surroundings seemed to have been summoned, and without exception, they all fell down in large swathes. Then they turned into dust as well. Yun Yang soared into the air and stood high in the air, watching in bewilderment as all the trees within a radius of hundreds of miles from where he was fell, turning into dust from near to far. Everywhere he looked, the dust obscured his vision. And in this entire area, it seemed like he was the only one close to this earth-shattering dust. Other than that, there was nothing else with any signs of life. Yun Yang, who was hovering in the air, was dumbstruck. Chapter 879. The silhouette hovering in the air was dumbstruck. Are you serious? According to the usual practice, it's only a rule to compensate an ascendant with some spiritual chi of heaven and earth. However, the ascendants in the past would at most make the trees within 30 to 40 feet wilt and be fine. Why is this person sucking 1,500 miles of forest dry today? What's going on? Could it be that this person has cultivated some demonic skill that allows him to devour the breath of living? So what if that's the case? What does it have to do with me? I'd better leave as soon as possible. To come and see, what's his background? It'll be troublesome if I get too involved with such a person. The silhouette hovering in the air disappeared with a swoosh. In Yun Yang's deific consciousness space, Emmy stretched lazily. Its leaves looked even more green and healthy before it went back to sleep. What's going on? Yun Yang's mind was still muddled, filled with questions that he could not unravel. I've come to the bound of universe as an ascendant this time. My previous experience has already proven this. How could I be thrown into a place like this? Don't I need to go through the registration procedure? Is there no one to receive me or follow up arrangements? Could it be? For a moment, many questions piled up in his mind, but none of them could be answered. It was only after some time when the dust had almost settled that Yun Yang realized that he had really been dumped here. He was certain that there was no one to receive him. No matter what, this young master is the unrivaled expert of the lower realm. How can there be no one to receive me when I come here? I don't even see a living person. I'm just dumped in the wilderness where there's no sign of human habitation. What's going on? Is this some kind of plot? Yun Yang grumbled, his heart filled with unhappiness. His high spirits earlier had vanished without a trace. While he was sorting out his emotions and getting his bearings, he raised his head to look at the position of the sun. He saw a small black dot in the sky falling down like a meteor. With a loud bang, the black dot rushed into the sea of dust that had just stopped after a long time. Then, poo 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 poo, surprisingly it was a person who fell into the thick dust. As expected, he choked and spat out the dust from his mouth. However, as he breathed, he unconsciously inhaled even more dust. His voice was extremely hazy. Pay. What is this? Following the complaint, the person struggled to stand up. Yun Yang glanced over and saw that the person was a rotund little fatty who did not look very old. This little fatty had a round head, round face, round eyes, round nose, round mouth, round ears, round belly. He actually looked quite funny. This fellow had just climbed out of the powder pit and was desperately rubbing his eyes with both hands. At the same time, he cleverly blew upwards with his mouth to blow off the powder on his face, but it only made the powder dance in the air. Then he remembered, damn it, why am I blowing? Why don't I use water? Before his words echoed in the air, a water sack appeared in his hand with a flick of his wrist. He poured out some water to wash his face and eyes and shook his head like a pug, flinging the water droplets off his face. Then he opened his eyes to look around and suddenly cried out, "Mother, how did this happen? Where's the forest?" The little fatty's cry sounded like he was grieving the death of his parents. It was obvious that he had lost his soul and there was a lot of disbelief in his voice. It was as if the boundless powder in front of him had shocked him greatly. Then, the little fatty waved his hands and a powerful force rose from the ground. In an instant, all the dust within a few hundred feet of where he stood was swept up and thrown somewhere. After a long while, there was a loud rumble as if another cloud of dust had risen from the other side. The little fatty, who had cleaned up his surroundings, did not stop moving. Like a hunting dog, he searched back and forth on the exposed mountain rocks, as if he was looking for something. As he looked, his nose sniffed wildly. After searching for a few hundred feet, he waved his hand and threw out a cloud of dust. The fellow looked and sniffed as he walked. When he finally found the spot where Yun Yang was standing, he did not look up. Instead, he sprawled on the ground, searching carefully for clues. After a while, he suddenly cried out, "Oh my yellow heaven! The mark I made is right here. This is obviously the forest, but where is the forest? Where did it go?" Yun Yang looked down and saw a round rock about 30 to 40 feet below his feet. There was a tortoise carved on it in a crooked manner, perhaps with a saber or a sword. It was a vivid likeness. The tortoise was stretching its neck out strenuously to look outside. At this moment, the little fatty was also lying on the ground, stretching his neck with great effort. He turned his head to look to the side. Looking at it this way, it was truly lifelike, complementing each other. The object resembled the owner, and there was no way they could be more compatible. Yin Yang could not help but be amused. This fellow seemed to be a clown. Yun Yang's amusement did not matter, but the little fatty below him was shocked. He sprung up and flew hundreds of feet away before raising his head in panic to look at Yun Yang, who was high up in the sky, and exclaimed, "Oh my God, there's someone here. You, who are you? Why are you here? Are you a human or a ghost? What's going on here?" Yun Yang was exasperated. Looking at the little fatty's movements and cultivation base, he was already a peerless expert. However, it was a fellow with such a cultivation base who did not even notice that Yun Yang had been standing on top of his head for a long time. He had been crawling around like a mouse under his feet for a long time, not realizing that there was a living person standing on top of his head. Such vigilance was a rare sight indeed. Yun Yang sighed inwardly. How did a person with such intelligence and vigilance survive in the bound of universe, a world where danger lurked at every step? Not only did he grow so big, but he was also so fat? Before Yun Yang could speak, the little fatty reacted swiftly, retreating hundreds of feet away in the blink of an eye. He stared at Yun Yang warily and suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs, "Who are you? Where has this forest gone to? You're outrageous. Did you see this young master's secret signal just now?" Without waiting for Yun Yang's reply, he had already spat out, "What a scoundrel, you refuse to give up your evil intentions. If so, this young master shall fight it out with you today." With a roar, he put on a fighting stance and said in anguish, Come on. This young master shall drag you down with me today. Even a rabbit will bite when it's cornered. How dare you, a pretty boy, bully me like this? Is there still justice in this world? Where's the justice in this world? Yun Yang was exasperated. This fellow was not just a weirdo, he was sick. In the blink of an eye, little fatty did not waste any more words. He had already turned into a round bolt of lightning and leaped over. In his hand, a long whip that flickered with golden light appeared as he attacked with great force. Yun Yang, who had been through many battles, was not flustered. Focusing his gaze, he saw that there was a shiny ball at the tip of the long whip in the little fatty's hand. The long whip was obviously a unique long whip, a meteor hammer. Yun Yang's thoughts raced as he raised his hand abruptly and hollered, "Wait!" Swoosh. As if bitten by a snake, the little fatty retreated hundreds of feet away with a whoosh and hollered, "Are you afraid? It's good that you're afraid." Chapter 880. Looking at the child's pale face from the sudden turn of events, Yun Yang could not help feeling amused. Who was the one who was afraid? He had only raised his hand and you'd run hundreds of feet away like a startled bird. Such courage? It was no wonder that the word afraid was used. Yun Yang said, "What do you mean by not giving up? What do you mean by going too far? What you're saying is rather random. I don't even know you. At most, I'm just a passerby who happened to bump into you. There's no need to make a big fuss about it. It's futile and will only add to my troubles." Yun Yang was not afraid of trouble, but he had just arrived in the bound of universe after all. He was unfamiliar with the place and people, so it was best not to stir up trouble if he could avoid it. Furthermore, there was a hidden meaning in the fatty's words. How could Yun Yang be a scapegoat for no reason? The fatty was taken aback and asked suspiciously, "You're really not here to kill me? Here to capture me? To ravage me? To mess with me?" Yun Yang's exasperation deepened. "No, I won't do it even if you're willing." The fatty chuckled, his expression relaxing. He then kept the whip and put on a smile as if he had been blessed by the heavens. He cupped his fists together enthusiastically and said, "I was wondering, how could my enemy be so handsome and charming? It turns out that a good friend has arrived. It's fate, it's fate." Friend? Fate? Becoming friends just because he's not hunting you down? Could it be that this is what you call fate? The fatty's round face was filled with a friendly smile as he asked in a flattering tone, "Big brother, tell me, how did you become so handsome? This young brother is truly envious and jealous." Yun Yang broke out in a cold sweat and raised his hand. "Stop, am I that close to you? I'm just a passerby." The fatty laughed and said, "You're just a passerby. It's a coincidence, it's fate. Aren't all friends born from coincidental encounters? We'll get closer in the future. This young brother Chen Duo Duo, may I know big brother's name?" Chen Duo Duo, what a nice name. Yun Yang thought to himself, are the people of the bound of universe all so friendly? Or could it be that this little fatty had ulterior motives? Putting everything else aside, the fatty's cultivation, the unique hammer whip, and the interspatial ring showed that he came from an extraordinary background. That day Lei Dongtian boasted that he was second to none. However, compared to the fatty in front of him, it was obvious that he was far from it. After some thought he answered honestly, "I am Yun Yang." After all, he was a newcomer, so there was no harm in saying his real name. Cloud Rising Wind, a good name, a good name. Chen Duoduo's honest face was filled with flattery. What a great name. Suddenly, with a swooshing sound, the serpentine meteor mace appeared above Yun Yang's head soundlessly and came crashing down, its murderous intent multiplying. This could be said to be extremely sudden, and it was impossible to guard against. In spite of this, Yun Yang had long been prepared. After all, he had encountered too many deceitful people before. As the saying went, those who were unaccountably solicitous were hiding evil intentions. They did not know each other, but the fatty was so friendly the moment they met. It was absurd. Yun Yang had long been prepared for this. It was still the same old saying. One could never be too careful when one had just arrived in this strange world. There was nothing wrong with being careful. The saber light flashed. But with a clang, the blade of heavens will struck the meteor hammer head-on. He really didn't know what material the meteor hammer was made of. It didn't look very big, but it actually didn't get split in half by the blade of heaven's will. Yun Yang's body shook in response to the attack, but he was completely unharmed. However, he was more cautious than ever. Just now little fatty's hammer had come and gone without a trace. His technique could not be said to be uncanny, and it was even more powerful and heavy. Obviously, this little fatty was not as weak and useless as he appeared. The jesting just now was a smokescreen to confuse the enemy. This fellow was obviously a top-notch expert. Recalling how flustered the fatty had been when he retrieved the meteor mace and how he had almost smashed himself, Yun-yang could not help sneering inwardly. This innocent and harmless little fatty was not only skilled, he was also an expert who knew how to pretend to be weak. He was not to be underestimated. On the other side, the fatty was even more shocked by the current situation. He had thought that his plan had worked, that he was confident, and that he was going to win with all his might, but it had been deflected by someone else's saber. Not only did the hammer that was usually hard to match not gain the upper hand, but his entire body had also been sent flying 30 feet away from the opponent's counterattack. Was this not proof of the opponent's valiant ability? The fatty, who was prepared to see his opponent's head explode, was almost scared out of his wits. He cried out like a male duck, "You're actually a honor level 3 cultivator?" Suddenly he wailed, "Oh my God. I can't believe I ran into a metal plate in such a remote place. Is there still justice in this world?" Seeing Yun-yang approach with his saber, the fatty stumbled back while calling out in a fawning manner, "Big brother, big brother, big brother, this is actually a misunderstanding. It's really just a misunderstanding, ah." Suddenly a saber light came slashing at him. The fatty was terrified as he rolled on the ground. He felt a chill on his face as a few strands of hair flew up from the corners of his eyes. At once, a deafening howl echoed in the air. This knife, completely disregarded his ability to dodge, had already accurately cut off a few strands of hair on the side of his face. The knife light flashed and even stuck close to his face into the ground, but no matter what, in the end it did not really hurt him at all. The source of that miserable howl was unknown, whether it was because he was scared or because he was acting again. Yun-yang made a judgment instantly. If the fatty's howl was still in act, he would have to raise his evaluation by 2 levels. This was an acting talent, how could he be underestimated? The little fatty lay stiffly on the ground in an extremely awkward position. He closed his eyes and trembled all over. With a sad face, he wailed, "It's a misunderstanding, it's really a misunderstanding. Spare me, I didn't mean to do it just now, my hand just cramped up." "It's a misunderstanding," Yun-yang said coldly, "you still dare to play this game with me now. Not only are you brave, you're smart as well. Tell me directly, who are you?" As he spoke, he rubbed the saber against the fatty's face. The icy touch caused goosebumps to rise all over the fatty's chubby face. The little fatty's face was ashen as he stuttered, big brother? You. Please, put the knife. Put it away. Little brother. I need to pee." Yun-yang kept the saber against the fatty's face and said in an unusually gentle tone, "Don't be afraid. My saber is very fast. When I chop off your head later, I promise you won't feel anything and won't know anything. I promise." The fatty looked like he was about to cry, his body twitching non-stop. Suddenly he felt something warm in his crotch as it dripped. He wailed, I'm afraid of this. Speak." Yun-yang's tone was even colder than before. A certain someone claimed to be a neat freak, but he could not leave immediately at this juncture. He could only thicken his mystical chi to isolate some sort of aura. It would be strange if his tone was pleasant. "You must hold your hand steady. This is really a misunderstanding." The fatty's snot and tears were running down his face. "I thought you were one of those bastards who hunted me down. You wanted my treasure, that's why I—" "Brother, it's a misunderstanding, I swear to heaven and earth." "Treasure? What treasure?" Yun-yang could not help being stunned and asked instinctively. With a smack, little fatty gave himself a hard slap on the face. He was extremely annoyed. "That stupid mouth of yours, spitting out everything." Chapter 881. Treasure? Yun-yang's gaze turned dangerous. Brother. I'll talk. Fatty was devastated. "It's like this. I came out to play this time, but somehow someone found out that I have a rhymed orchid on me. Then I was hunted down by those shameless people. I ran all the way. There's no justice in this world, there's no justice." He lifted his head to look at Yun-yang tearfully. "I really thought you were with those bad guys just now. I really didn't mean it. You must believe me." Yun-yang was non-committal as he said in a low voice, "Rhymed orchid? Where is it? Take it out for me to see. Prove that you're telling the truth, then I can decide if I want to believe you." Little fatty blinked his eyes and whispered, "Bro, you must believe me." Absolutely not. I've already sent someone to send the rhymed orchid home." "Send home?" Yes. Fatty nodded like a chick pecking at grains. Yun-yang hummed and said, "So, if I find another rhymed orchid, it'll be my destiny. At least it won't be the one you have, right? Your one has been sent back after all." Fatty grinned. Ah, that's right, that's right. That's right, that's right. Heaven's justice, heaven's justice. Yun Yang smiled and turned to leave, saying slowly, since it's a misunderstanding, let's call it even. Let's not meet again in the martial world. Fatty was stunned for a moment before he crawled up from the ground like he had just woken up from a dream. Watching Yun Yang's receding silhouette, he was still a little lost. Had he just passed the stage? In the little fatty's expectations, this pretty boy in front of him should not continue to forcefully intimidate him. Stripping him of his clothes and wantonly plundering him was within his expectations. How could this pretty boy actually have good intentions? Then little fatty saw Yun Yang walking back to where he came from. His destination was the boulder with the turtle drawn on it. Fatty's heart skipped a beat as he followed. Big brother, slow down. Don't fall. As he walked, he stuck his hand into his crotch. With a rip, he tore off the wet underwear that reeked of urine and threw it away. Then he started running. To be honest, this chilly breeze was actually quite pleasant. Just as little fatty walked over, he saw Yun Yang lifting the rock and reaching his hand in to retrieve a white jade box. Without any hesitation, Yun Yang opened the box and saw a graceful orchid lying within. Its leaves were healthy, its petals crystal clear, its beauty amplified. Yun Yang took a closer look and saw that the ice orchid seemed to be able to change. One moment it was a picturesque landscape, the next it was a lush forest, the next moment it was a high mountain and waterfall, the next moment it was a starry night and a bright moon. Although it was only a small orchid, it possessed a myriad of colors, light and shadows. It was extremely strange. Yun Yang exclaimed, I didn't expect the rhymed orchid to be abundant here. It's rare indeed. You've just sent one back and here's another one for the guest. I'll have to look around later to see if there are other rhymed orchids. Little fatty Chen Duoduo's facial muscles twitched as his round eyes looked at the rhymed orchid and then at Yun Yang's face. He chuckled dryly and said, Big brother is really lucky. He chuckled and said, this flower is really beautiful. Can I have a look? Ever since I was born, I've never seen such a beautiful and gorgeous flower. Yun Yang glared at him. What did you say? Didn't you just send one back? Haven't you seen enough? Chen Duoduo was taken aback and chuckled dryly. That one of mine is far from the one you got, big brother. Yun Yang looked at the rhymed orchid in his hand, deep in thought. He asked in a low voice, what's the use of this rhymed orchid? Chen Duoduo's eyes shone as he said with a smirk, this orchid has no use at all. It's just pretty and at most it can live for a longer period of time. Girls like it very much. I won't hide it from big brother, the main reason I wanted this flower is to pick up girls. The effect is especially good. Yun Yang came to a sudden realization and said, I see. This exotic orchid looks so amazing but it only has this little use. I'm so disappointed. I thought it was some great destiny. Then let's destroy it. It'll only be a disaster if I keep it. Once he said that, he raised his hand and slapped it down mercilessly. Little fatty Chen Duoduo grabbed Yun Yang's hand, his chubby face pale. Big brother, how can you do this to such a beautiful flower? Didn't I say it already? This is a great tool for picking up girls? A great tool for picking up girls? Yun Yang turned his head and smiled faintly. Fatty, I don't care if you're really called Chen Duoduo or something else. From now on tell me the truth. If there's a single lie, I'll destroy this orchid and torture you bit by bit. Do you think it's better to peel off your skin and pull out your tendons first? Or do you think it's better to use all the fat on your body to light up the sky lantern? These two methods don't contradict each other. They can be carried out at the same time. Little fatty shuddered and said, Mother, I understand. Yun Yang glared. What did you call me? Mother. This stupid mouth of mine. Big brother. This is my pet phrase, I can't help it, this stupid mouth of mine. He slapped himself twice and put on a long face. When I'm anxious, I'll call my mother, and when I'm surprised, I'll call the heavens. This is a bad habit that I've developed since I was young. I'm telling the truth. Yun Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry. He sighed softly, looking up at the sky. Your catchphrase is mother. I thought it was justice and justice. He did not expect to meet such a clown the moment he came to the bound of universe. He was afraid of death. He knew that Yun Yang could kill him with a raise of his hand, but he did not leave and followed him obediently. His acting skills were like that of a veteran actor. Or perhaps, a fatty's acting prodigy. Effervescent rhymed orchid. Yes, this effervescent rhymed orchid is an extremely rare treasure. It can cure chronic diseases, cure incurable illnesses, and bring the dead back to life. The most miraculous function of this lotus is that it can restore the meridians of the crippled and paralyzed person within a short period of time, regaining their vitality. To a martial artist, this is a priceless treasure. Especially to those whose cultivation base has been destroyed, it's a dream item. They won't even frown no matter how high the price is. Knowing that Yun Yang was not to be fooled, little fatty dared not play any tricks this time. He spilled the beans honestly and spilled the truth with a long face. So, you have such a disability in your family? You want to heal your body with this orchid? Yun Yang asked without batting an eyelid. Chapter 882. The effervescent rhymed orchid was not bad. It would not be an exaggeration to call it a rare treasure. However, Yun Yang did not care for it. He was even a little disappointed. In terms of healing, what could compare to Emmy? The little fatty's face immediately turned red. He thought for a moment before saying, I just wanted to buy it for a rainy day. No one would complain about having too much of such a fantastic item. Who would have thought that even though I bought it, I would be targeted by someone with ulterior motives? Unfortunately, I was chased out of the house and lost my support. Sigh, I've been chased so miserably along the way. People's hearts are not what they used to be, and there's no justice in the world. Yun Yang asked in bewilderment, Stop, can you not talk about justice? With your cultivation base and ability, how could you be alive until now if someone really targeted you and chased you all the way? You're still alive and kicking and you still have the strength to fight? Fatty felt insulted and retorted angrily, What about my cultivation base? I'm an ace cultivator too. I'm a second-level honor cultivator. Do you think that third-level honor cultivators like you can be found everywhere in the bound of universe? Yun Yang gave him a sideways glance and smiled faintly, declining to comment. Fatty blushed and said, The imperial court has its laws, the martial world has its morals. The martial world has its own rules. If you want to rob, you can't rob. If you want to rob, you can't rob. This is the rule that's been passed down since the beginning of time. Who dares violate it? Yun Yang was surprised. Is there such a rule? Today my ears have been opened once again. He was curious. Robbery and murder were always linked together. Robbing but sparing the victim's life? Was it not waiting for the victim to seek revenge? Was there such a rule here? Hearing Yun Yang's words, Fatty was taken aback. He looked at Yun Yang like he was looking at a deity and stammered, You're wrong. Why do you sound like a virgin? Yun Yang's eyes widened as he chided, Virgin? You're the virgin, your whole family is virgin. But I've indeed just ascended to this realm. What's wrong? Yun Yang minded it the most when others called him a fledgling. Although he understood what little fatty meant by fledgling, he still reprimanded him instinctively. The little fatty's mouth turned into a round black hole. He spoke in a tone as if he was about to die from shock. He said in a rather frantic manner, You just ascended? Suddenly, he thumped his chest and stamped his feet. A novice who's just ascended, and he's already done me in? Abused? Just how useless am I? Yun Yang added, Today is my first day in this realm. The little fatty's shoulders drooped and his head hung low, as if he didn't want to say a word. His remaining confidence had also disappeared. At this moment, the frustration and humiliation in his heart overwhelmed the fear of death. It was too embarrassing. I was F***ed by a newly ascended, Alright fatty I'm not a fatty. My name is Richie Rich. My name is Chen Duo Duo. This was his real name. That's his real name, you know? I'm Chen Duo Duo, Chen Duo Duo is me. Little fatty was flustered, defending himself with a pale face. Alright, fatty. Let me tell you, I know that this orchid is yours. It's useless for me to hold on to it. Let's do this. As long as you tell me about the big and small matters of the bound of universe, like the martial world's iron rules or the more influential forces, sects and families, I'll give it to you and let you go as long as I'm satisfied. What do you think? Yun Yang laid out his terms. The little fatty seemed to have reached his limit. If he continued, he might go overboard. Furthermore, Yun Yang immediately realized that this world was different from the Tianshan continent when he heard about the rule of robbing and not killing. If such a rule existed, there must be plenty of other rules as well. Once these were offended, it would usually be a disaster. It was better to find out about these things first. As for the little fatty offending him, so what? He could just beat him up if he was in a bad mood. Little fatty lifted his head in disbelief. Such a dreamy item, a rare treasure. You're actually willing to give it to me? Suddenly he thought of something and paled, shuddering. I was really stupid just now. I thought you're from the bound of universe and that I'll only rob you of your wealth and not your life. That was F***ing close. You're new here and you don't know the rules at all. What if you stab me? I'd die so unjustly and I wouldn't even have a place to cry to. That was so close. Yun Yang rolled his eyes. What nonsense are you spouting? Just tell me if you're okay or not. Do you believe I won't destroy you and make you cry all you want right here? Sure. Little Fatty was very straightforward. I'll tell you everything I know. As long as you listen to my introduction, I'll guarantee that you'll become a bound of universe in 3 days at most. I guarantee that it'll be worth it and you'll be satisfied. By right, Little Fatty's words were rather bold. Based on Yun Yang's understanding of the bound of universe, he knew that it was a vast place with a dense population and numerous forces. It was practically impossible for him to inform Yun Yang of all the information in just 3 days. However, what surprised Yun Yang was that the child was not bluffing this time. He really knew everything about the bound of universe and spilled everything out as if he was very familiar with it. Roaming the martial world in the bound of universe, the rules of the martial world must be known and abided by. Even if it's not strictly enforced, it must at least be superficial so that others can't pick out any actual mistakes. First, lust. Once this is violated, it's a capital offense. There's no escape. Second, there are rules in every trade and there are rules for thieves. The bound of universe itself is a super martial world. There are countless professions in this martial world and each profession has its own set of rules. For example, theft. For example, assassins. For example, gangs. For example. There were all kinds of strange things. The little fatty could not stop talking until his mouth was dry. He had already drunk 3 pots of water, but he was still in high spirits. The more he talked, the redder his face became, and the more he talked, the more high-spirited he became. These were the things that the elders had to teach their juniors on a daily basis and before they roamed the martial world. He had been the one being taught in the past and now that he had the chance to impart his teachings to others, how could he not indulge in it? It was a delightful feeling. Assassins work for money. They take money and eliminate disasters for others, but they can only take the payment for the killing. The employer pays and you kill the target. Then the process ends. Even if the target has wealth that can rival a nation, you don't take a single cent otherwise you die. Robbers, one-legged robbers or thieves? It's the same rule. Robbers take money but not lives. Robbers take lives but not wealth. If you steal money but keep your life, you'll leave some leeway for others. Even if there are thousands of assets and you can take them all, you can only take 90% at most. You have to leave 10% untouched. This is what it means to be a lone wolf and not a lone wolf. The martial world's duel is a one-on-one fight. If one party breaks the rules, even if they win, they'll still die afterward. There are no exceptions. Gangs and schools have their own rules. Those who break the rules will be punished, but most of the time, it won't cost their lives. However, the martial world's publicly acknowledged rule is death once it's broken. There's no room for compromise. The bound of universe's divine punishment only needs a bolt of lightning to turn a top-notch expert into ashes. Take the duel as an example. When divine punishment targets the violator, the scope of pursuit isn't limited to the violator alone. Anyone who participates in the battle will be pursued without exception. Yun Yang was mesmerized by the explanation, feeling like his horizons had been broadened. Chapter 883. Does this mean that someone or some force is maintaining the order of the bound of universe? Who is the force that maintains the order? The bound of universe's imperial court? Yun Yang asked. What imperial court? The martial world is the martial world. Where is the imperial court? Little Fatty looked at Yun Yang like he was looking at a country bumpkin. How can there be anyone or any force that can maintain this rule? This is a powerful force that pervades the entire bound of universe. Legend has it that this rule was set by Lord Monarch himself back then. The power of heaven's punishment was also set by Lord Monarch himself. Lord Monarch is a terrifying presence that can make the entire bound of universe disappear with just a spit of his. Who dares defy him? Therefore, the bound of universe's martial world is a place of rules and order. In the bound of universe you can be in any profession. As long as you work hard and achieve something, you'll be recognized. However, every profession has its own rules. Even those that are more unique and aren't mentioned in the rules shouldn't think that you have an advantage. They aren't within the scope of the so-called rules, but they'll still be punished by the martial world's rules. Furthermore, all the rules are imposed on these professions with even more restrictions. Therefore, in the bound of universe, one has to choose an occupation that's more suitable for oneself when one first roams the martial world. It doesn't matter if it's an assassin, a bandit, a bodyguard, a guard, a merchant, a doctor, or even information gathering, fortune-telling, driving a boat, stealing a prostitute, any occupation that is convenient to others is fine. However, rules are rules. No one can violate them. There's no small punishment if one violates them. There's only one outcome, death. Annihilation of one's soul. Strict rules. Severe punishment. Yunyang could not help thinking, wouldn't the world be much more peaceful this way? At least, some of the weaker ones would be protected by the entire world. The rules set by this Lord Monarch have truly resonated with me. However, these rules, it took Yunyang a great deal of effort to digest the information. Even though there were still some parts that he could not understand, he memorized them and dissected them in detail when he had the time. What about the levels of martial arts in the bound of universe? How about the division of forces? What are the reputable sects, noble families, and influential forces? Yunyang tossed out a series of questions. After all, these were what he was most concerned about. Aya, it's so annoying that people like you don't know anything. Do you think that you can only rely on martial arts to roam the martial world? The little fatty proudly complained in a condescending manner. Then he began to explain eloquently, this is like this, why don't we drink some wine and talk? Then we have to find a good place. All right. In the beginning they were shouting about fighting and killing, and in the blink of an eye, but now they were gathering together to drink. Yunyang was the initiator and facilitator, so he did not feel that it was out of place. However, the fatty's reaction was natural as well. His reaction was strange and unusual. He clearly knew that his cultivation base was far inferior to Chu Feng's, and they were enemies before. They had once fought to the death and even fell into a state of waiting for death. But now he could still be so happy. He was truly a weirdo who could do what others couldn't. Yet, little fatty's eagerness to talk was visible to the naked eye, at least in Yunyang's eyes. If this was still acting, he would not be a good actor, but an award-winning performance. It was stunning. Right, didn't you say that someone is after you? Yunyang thought of the question. It's safer to go somewhere more secluded at this point. The fatty tensed up when he heard that, looking like he still had some lingering fear. He glanced at the path they had come from and said hurriedly, let's go, let's go. Oh mother, I was too busy telling you the information just now and forgot about this. I've set up a formation for them. Although it's successfully activated, it can't hold them off for long. Now. As he spoke, his face turned pale as he urged, go, go, go. Let's go that way, let's go quickly. Both of them changed directions at once and made several turns. After some time they finally left the deserted area and were in another dense forest. Before they left, Yunyang turned back and looked at the forest that had turned into dust seriously, his eyes filled with confusion. Ever since Emmy came to the bound of universe, it seemed to have woken up for a moment before it went back to sleep. However, it was different from the time when it had gone into a defensive slumber due to the depletion of its energy. Now, it had gone into hibernation because it had received an inexplicable benefit that it could not digest immediately. As long as it absorbed the benefit into itself, it would be able to recover without any hindrance. However, Yunyang did not know any of this. The two of them entered the dense forest and circled around. The little fatty found a tree so thick that it would take a dozen people to wrap their arms around it. The crown of the tree was like a huge umbrella, opening up the sky for dozens of feet. What a huge tree. Let's talk about it under this tree. Don't. Before the fatty could finish his sentence, he was suddenly stunned, his mouth agape and tongue tied as he trembled all over. A person slowly walked out from both sides of the tree, one tall, one short, one fat, and one skinny. The newcomers had their arms crossed in front of their chests as they stared at Chen Duoduo. Their gazes were filled with mockery. Chen Duoduo, we're obviously lost, but you came looking for us. We should really thank you for your generosity. Chen Duoduo grew even more dumbfounded, not knowing what to do. The atmosphere was extremely awkward. Yunyang stopped abruptly and took a step back, his eyes squinting. The first thought that popped into his mind was, could this be a trap set by Chen Duoduo? Then, Chen Duoduo wouldn't be so stupid, would he? His final thought was, yes, this fellow is just that stupid. Yunyang was an astute person. Just by looking at the expressions of both parties, he understood everything in an instant. The awkward situation before him was entirely little fatty's own doing. He had set up the bewitching formation to confuse the enemy and the effect was obvious. It had indeed bewitched them. However, he had thought that he was smart enough to find a safe place after escaping, and now he had automatically sent himself to the other party. How could something like this happen? Yunyang could only feel an indescribable sense of collapse. There was actually such a weirdo in this world. If it were not for him, the variable, would it not be the same as the saying, heaven's wrongs can be forgiven, but one's own wrongs cannot be forgiven? Chapter 884. Yin-Yang sighed. That's right. If this goes on, it'll be hard for the poor to have a son. At the end of the day, it's just because of the huge disparity in the distribution of spiritual qi in this world, the little fatty chuckled. Think about it. Even if you're a peerless genius and have a suitable and profound cultivation method, you'll have to cultivate for 100 years, and you won't even be able to cultivate as fast as those top sects in a day. How are you going to compete with them? You can only join a sect because of the situation. Only then can you improve further. However, it's not easy to join a sect, especially those big ones. The path of cultivation is difficult. It's not just a saying. Yun Yang's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. An ordinary cultivator's entire life could only be equal to a day of a super sect's disciple. How could they compare? According to Little Fatty, it wasn't nearly impossible to conquer the bound of universe single-handedly. In fact, it was absolutely impossible. Just as Yun Yang's heart was haunted by negative emotions, Fatty continued, those who possess the amethyst celestial luck banner and the golden celestial luck banner basically don't roam the martial world. Even if they do, 99% of them won't reveal their identity. After all, it's too much of a bully to compete or fight with others with their background and ability. However, those who possess the black, green and silver colors are enough to look down on their peers and look askance at rogue cultivators in the martial world. Chen Duoduo's chubby face was radiant as he talked about these things. Speaking of which, Yun Yang was lucky. If it had been someone else who knew about these things, they might not have been as knowledgeable as Little Fatty, who was able to understand the crux of the matter in such an orderly manner, even if it had been someone else. Although Chen Duoduo's cultivation base was nothing in Yun Yang's eyes, he was very familiar with the things that Yun Yang desperately wanted to know. He was so knowledgeable that even Yun Yang was impressed by him. Perhaps this was the root cause of his low cultivation base and limited combat power. Yun Yang came to this conclusion. On the surface, the bound of universe's martial world is controlled by 4 forces. The 9 states and 4 seas are divided into 4 regions. The place we're in now is under the jurisdiction of Sacred Heart Palace, one of the 4 palaces of the East Celestial Palace. The other 3 palaces are Sacred Origin Palace, Sacred Soul Palace, and Sacred Deity Palace. The 4 great powers are Xiaoyao Palace, Eastern Heavenly Palace, Western Holy Palace and Northern Devil Palace. Among them, Eastern Heavenly Palace is ranked 2nd. Among them, East Celestial Palace ranks 2nd. The reason why Xiaoyao Palace is the leader of the Elemental Gathering Palace is partly because the Demon King is the ruler of the world and his power is unparalleled. Secondly, the 12 Demon Kings and 36 Demon Generals under him are all tyrannical beings who can move unhindered in the world. After that, Chen Duoduo began to introduce the territories of the 4 major forces one by one, as well as the unique characteristics of their individual strengths. He went on, one after another. Just the introduction of the Eastern Celestial Palace alone took him a good 4 hours. It seemed like he was far from done, and this was just the tip of the iceberg. Yun Yang, on the other hand, was not the least bit anxious. He listened attentively throughout the entire process and memorized them carefully, committing them to memory. Everything that he had obtained today would be things that he could use to roam the Shenhuang world in the future. The more detailed he knew, the better. He did not mind Little Fatty's nagging. To Yun Yang, the more verbose and detailed such nagging, the better. Actually, as the 4 top forces in the bound of universe, other than the lower and middle level sects, the other high-level cultivators have long been disdainful of the martial world. It's too embarrassing. After a long time they finally finished talking about the 4 major powers. The Little Fatty said something that sounded like a conclusion. Yin Yang could not help choking. F***CK, they don't even want to walk the martial world anymore. King talked excitedly from night to day. At the same time, Yun Yang felt a lingering shock in his heart. Little Fatty's words seemed to have another meaning. Those high-level cultivators did not want to walk the martial world. Even if they were disdainful, even if they were embarrassed, this was not the point. Instead, where did they go? This kind of xiuzhe, this kind of high-level existence, it was impossible for them to hide, and their cultivation path to stop. The so-called true meaning of not roaming the Jianghu instead had another meaning. It should be that he had other experiences to go through. Such a place could not be compared to the ordinary martial world. Under the 4 forces, the cultivators of the same level from the 4 temples of the Eastern Celestial Palace basically don't walk the martial world anymore. Although everyone knew that they wouldn't truly disappear from this world, it was impossible for them to do so. Even if they do, who can recognize them as long as they don't reveal their identity? So, on the surface, it's the martial world sects fighting for supremacy. Under each temple there are 3 upper-class sects, 6 middle-class sects and 9 lower-class sections. These sects are qualified to own the Celestial Luck Banner. Below them are the lower-class sects, rogue cultivators and various noble families. They're competing against each other, fighting for the chance to rise. There was a hint of sadness in Little Fatty's voice at this moment. The sudden sigh made Yunyang take a second look at him. "What are you sighing about? What exactly does the chance to rise refer to?" asked Yunyang. "The ownership of the Celestial Luck Banner." Little Fatty Chen Duo said, "The location of the Celestial Luck Banner isn't fixed. It can be snatched. When a sect reaches a certain level, it can challenge the sect that owns the Celestial Luck Banner. As long as it wins the challenge, it can replace the original sect and obtain the Celestial Luck Banner. As for the defeated sects, they will naturally fall due to the loss and will not be able to recover. This is also the last path to heaven that the person who created the Celestial Luck Banner left for the lowest class cultivators, a way to ascend." Yunyang's eyes lit up when he heard this. Stroking his chin, he murmured, "There's actually such a thing? Interesting." Looking at Yunyang's expression, Chen Duo scoffed and said, "Interesting? Do you think this path is easy?" This road was truly a single log bridge, a road of no return. There are 4 temples under the Eastern Celestial Palace. Under each temple there are only 18 sects, 3 upper-class sects, 6 middle-class sects and 9 lower-class sects. But do you know how many other sects without Celestial Luck Banners there are? How many forces and how many people want to cross this one log bridge? Yunyang asked, "How many? Could it be that there are hundreds of sects, 1 in 100? 1 in 100? Under each temple, at the most conservative estimate, there must be 30 to 20,000 sects." Little Fatty said lightly, "That's about it. There are sects and aristocratic families in total, but it's still not enough to choose 1 in 100. Don't you think it's more interesting now?" Yunyang shuddered, ignoring Little Fatty's sarcastic tone for a moment. 30 to 20,000 forces, to fight for 9 lower-class Celestial Luck Banners? What kind of ratio was this? Chapter 885. Yunyang's decisiveness stunned the 2 men in front of him. It was rare to see a fat sheep in the underworld being so decisive. Shouldn't he negotiate first before begging for mercy when faced with the 2 of them? Shouldn't he be forced to compromise after being toyed with like a cat toying with a mouse by the 2 of them? Why did it seem like he was doing it on purpose, like he could not wait for them to make things difficult for him? This did not seem right. Chen Duo, who was standing aside, reminded him, "Boss, be careful. These 2 are the infamous Bamboo Garden duo. They're both honor level 3 pinnacle characters." Not only did this sentence infuriate the so-called twin killers of Bamboo Garden, it also made Yunyang's teeth ache with hatred. "If it wasn't for you, would your father have to face the Bamboo Garden duo so soon?" Their stance was clear with just a word of disagreement. Without further ado, the 2 men sprung up and attacked at the same time, a sword and an axe in a menacing manner. The other party had just sprung up and had yet to actually attack, but Yunyang could already feel an unprecedented pressure coming towards him. The sudden and massive aura made Yunyang instantly understand the level of these 2 people's abilities. At this moment, Yunyang, who was facing the immense murderous aura, was delighted instead of shocked. Instead, an odd thought rose in his mind. Based on the capabilities that these 2 men had displayed so far, at least, he felt that they were at Ling Xiaozui and Duguchao's level. Perhaps they could not compare to the duo, but they were probably on the same level. According to Fatty Chen Duo, Ling Xiaozui, Duguchao, and Gu Chaoyang, who had arrived earlier, could basically be safe and sound in the bound of universe as long as they did not provoke any major trouble. Thinking of this, Yunyang could not help but feel relieved. As for Ji Lingxi, Yunyang was not worried at all. With the existence of the red light that could slay gods, not only could Ji Lingxi do as she pleased in the Tianshan continent, she could do the same in this realm as well. At the very least, before she met some pinnacle experts who could break through the red light, Ji Lingxi did not have to worry about anyone. Moreover, Ji Lingxi's cultivation base was not mediocre either. She had already surpassed Ling Xiaozui and Duguchou, so she was definitely a minor expert. Good timing. Seeing the incoming attack, Yunyang wielded the divine edge at once. His entire aura changed as well. From the gentle and elegant young master he was a moment ago to a towering, unstoppable god of death. Seeing this, the two people on the other side couldn't help but be shocked. Although both parties had yet to officially meet, the unshakable aura that Yunyang exuded was already overwhelming. It was a unique atmosphere where one's head was in the clear sky, and one's feet were on the ground like a towering mountain, majestic and solemn. The skinny man was already halfway through his attack when he suddenly twisted his body and a golden light flashed in his palm. A ray of light shot out from his hand and hit Chen Duoduo's lower abdomen. His judgment just now was wrong. The fellow in front of him was actually a formidable opponent, and most likely difficult to deal with. In that case, the most important thing to do was not to end this battle as soon as possible but to deal with the other combat power of the enemy, Chen Duoduo. As long as he lost his combat power and could no longer support this fellow, the two of them could completely eliminate their worries and go all out against Yunyang. They could even make use of Chen Duoduo as a weakness of the expert in front of them, closing the encirclement and attacking the enemy's reinforcements, creating a diversion. Chen Duoduo's cultivation base was not weak, at the level of a second-level honor, but he did not have much experience in fighting an enemy. When plotting against others he would gain the upper hand by striking first so he could be considered agile. Now that he was ambushed he could not react in time and was struck. Chen Duoduo shrieked loudly. It was not a big deal for him to cry out as the ambush he had suffered was within Yunyang's expectations. However, Yunyang was still rather disgusted by this child, so he did not lend a helping hand or warn him, intending to teach him a lesson. After all, the skinny man's attack was meant to paralyze Chen Duoduo's combat power, not to take his life. In spite of it, the protective blue light that glowed from Chen Duoduo's body the moment he was struck shocked Yunyang. The moment the golden light touched Chen Duoduo's abdomen, a beam of blue light rose and knocked the golden light to the ground. This child's weapon is strange. Let's kill him together first, the fat man roared. The skinny man's delay was only the blink of an eye, but the fat man had already been engulfed by Yunyang's overwhelming saber light in this short span of time. Clang, clang, clang. After a series of continuous sounds of weapons colliding, the fatty was shocked to find that the high-grade heaven-splitting axe that he relied on to run amok in Jianghu was already covered in wounds and riddled with holes in an instant. When the skinny man's sword came to his aid and allowed the fat man to catch his breath, the fat man lowered his head to take a closer look. The heaven-opener axe that he treasured like a treasure and refused to leave his side for even a moment had turned into a sawtooth blade. From the axe's head to its hilt, there were densely packed cracks and they were all facing the same direction. Even if one really intended to use it as a saw blade, one could not wield it at all. The fat man wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. It was also at this moment that the skinny man let out a deafening roar like the fat man earlier. "Fat man, what are you doing? This child's weapon is too strange. Help him quickly." The fat man looked towards the direction of the voice and saw that the long sword in the skinny man's hand had turned into something similar to his axe. Just as he was about to step forward to help, there was a crisp clang as the skinny man's long sword broke into 2 pieces. Then it became 3 pieces. After all, Yunyang would not stop just because his sword was broken. Of course he wanted to take his life while he was down. The skinny man, who had managed to block another strike, retreated swiftly, intending to avoid the sharp edge. In spite of this, there was still no expression on the extraordinarily handsome face of his fluttering purple robe. He charged forward in a flash, his intention to kill was clear and vivid. With another clang, there was only the hilt left in the skinny man's sword. Both of them exclaimed at the same time, "Third-level honor?" Prior to this, both of them had tried their best to overestimate Yunyang's cultivation base, but they still did not expect that this young man's cultivation base was actually on par with both of them, who had cultivated for more than 100 years. Otherwise, no matter how divine the weapon was, it would not be able to break a weapon that was protected by layers of powerful mystical chi so easily. The skinny man retreated, throwing the hilt of his sword like a hidden weapon, trying his best to fight for the slightest gap. With a flash of cold light, another sword appeared in his hand. The fat man had changed to another axe as well, charging forward with all his might to provide support. Both of them knew that the combined combat power of the youth before them was beyond their estimation. If either of them were to fall, the other would not be spared either. Only when both of them were together and resisted stubbornly could they have a chance of survival. Chapter 886. For a moment, the blade light rained down like rain, focusing on the skinny man. However, there was another blade that seemed to appear out of thin air. It flashed and went straight for the fatty's vital point between the brows with the speed of a white steed flashing past a crack. Saber Truth. Destiny blade appeared for the first time in the bound of universe. The saber was merciless and the Tao was merciless. One skill and two styles were executed at the same time. Blood splashed as the two men cried out in pain and retreated at the same time. The fatty cried out hurriedly, "Who are you? This is a misunderstanding, have mercy." Yun Yang's expression did not change, neither did his gaze. Only the saber light shone brightly as another world seemed to appear in front of the duo. Saber lair. Their upper bodies, shoulders, chests and other parts of their bodies were struck by the saber. They staggered back, blood gushing out of their wounds. Both men felt like their souls were being torn apart. They waved the weapons in their hands and defended themselves with all their might, but they could not defend themselves against the worldly disturbance. Fortunately, they relied on their profound cultivation base and mystical chi that protected them to reduce the saber's power, so they were not killed. However, what happened next made them feel even more hopeless. Two rays of saber light, one black and one white, one yin and one yang, appeared in the sky. Saber Truth. Destiny blade made its debut one after another, continuing the legend of the saber in the bound of universe. Yun Yang's voice was cold. Life and death in a thought. Stop. We are. Feeling the bone-chilling threat of death, the two of them shouted at the same time, intending to turn the tide and return to the sky. However, it was too late. The two of them hadn't even finished speaking when their heads had already flown up while completely round pillars of blood sprayed out violently, showing the end of the battle. With a flash of his purple robe, Yun Yang stood 30 feet away, looking coldly at the two headless corpses that had yet to fall to the ground as blood gushed out from their necks. After a while, two dull thuds could be heard as the two corpses fell to the ground. Almost at the same time, two mysterious auras entered Yun Yang's deific consciousness space without a sound. Yun Yang raised his eyebrows abruptly. This was probably the karmic aura of this realm, and it was much stronger than the profound sky continents. Killing these two people was much denser than killing over 100 villains in the profound sky continent, so it could be considered as a decent harvest. The result was a pleasant surprise to Yun Yang. But what he felt was completely different. Little fatty Chen Duo stared at Yun Yang with his mouth agape and then at the two corpses. Suddenly he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Ah! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!" Yun Yang frowned and asked, "Have you gone mad? I'm helping him kill his enemy, but he's actually shouting like a madman. He doesn't seem to be surprised at all. What kind of show is this? Is he addicted to acting?" Yun Yang was already annoyed by this child, and now he was even more annoyed. When he turned to look, he could not help but widen his eyes. Above the two corpses on the ground, the shadows of two flags suddenly emerged, swaying in the wind and stopping in the air. It was a spectacular sight. Although the two flags were only illusions, one could clearly see that they were glowing with a green light. They were like reflections of the void, as if they were real. It was a strange sight indeed. When a profound cultivator died, his soul would appear due to his profound cultivation base, and he could even enter the cycle of reincarnation. It was not rare, however, for two flags to emerge from his body. What was going on? This was completely beyond Yun Yang's understanding. Even with his wisdom and composure, he could not help but be stunned as he asked with a frown, "What is this?" The question was naturally directed at little fatty Chen Duo, a native of the bound of universe. Before Yun Yang's words echoed in the air, the two flags had already fluttered and soared into the air. Then the illusions disappeared without a trace. Little fatty screamed at the top of his lungs, "The celestial luck banner. It's the green celestial luck banner. The celestial luck banner. It's over, it's over." Yun Yang gave him a slap and said angrily, "What do you mean by over? What are you screaming for? Are you screaming for your soul?" Little fatty's face was filled with despair. "Boss, we're in big trouble? Big trouble?" Yun Yang frowned. "What kind of trouble?" At this moment, little fatty's face was filled with grief. "That's the celestial luck banner. Oh my God, this isn't the place to talk. Let's go." Yun Yang disposed of the two corpses with a wave of his hand and grabbed little fatty, the two of them leaving swiftly. Just by looking at little fatty's reaction, he knew that this was no trivial matter. However, the person had already been killed. Even if he regretted it, it was useless. Since it was useless, it was more important to sort out the cause and effect as soon as possible. Little fatty might not be able to explain the matter to him in a short amount of time, but it was something that Yun Yang needed to understand urgently. It was more important to find a place to sort out the cause and effect. Half a day later, in a secluded cave. The paleness on Little Fatty's face had yet to fade and his gaze was still blank. The Celestial Luck Banner. Sai, you've just ascended, so of course you don't know about it. Let me tell you, the Celestial Luck Banner is a top-notch item in this world. Only when a school or family is established and has reached a certain level and is recognized by God, will the Celestial Luck Banner appear. In other words, the Celestial Luck Banner is almost equivalent to the school's treasure. The Celestial Luck Banner gathers the spiritual chi of heaven and earth and stabilizes the school's fortune. It's the treasure of destiny. The treasure of destiny. The Celestial Luck Banner is divided into 6 grades. The lower-class Celestial Luck Banner is black. As long as a school of a certain scale has reached a certain level of ability and qualification, it can possess it. As long as a school has the Celestial Luck Banner, its power will definitely soar because everyone in the school will receive the benefit of accelerated cultivation. The black low-grade Celestial Luck Banner can double the density of spiritual energy at the sex location. Moreover, because of the sex providence, when its disciples cultivate and absorb spiritual energy, their absorption speed is several times faster than ordinary itinerant cultivators. Do you understand now? When the concentration of spiritual chi is doubled, the providence will double the cultivation speed. In this case, the cultivation speed of a disciple of a lower-class school will be 4 times faster than that of an itinerant cultivator without a school. Little Fatty looked at Yunyang and said with some resentment, "Do you understand now?" Yunyang took a deep breath and said, "I understand a little." Then, do higher grades of Celestial Luck Banners have stronger effects? He thought to himself, if that's the case, doesn't it mean that the itinerant cultivators in this world have no way out? No matter how talented and gifted one was, how could it be compared to someone else's cultivation being enhanced by a school? Not to mention, any disciple that could be accepted by a large sect would have a weak aptitude. Above the lower-class black Celestial Luck Banner is the middle-class green Celestial Luck Banner. Little Fatty said, the green Celestial Luck Banner can increase the concentration of spiritual chi at the school's location by 4 times. The providence of the school is still twice, but when combined, it's 6 times. Little Fatty blinked and said with a chuckle, although the providence is mysterious, it's a fixed number. No matter what grade of the Celestial Luck Banner, the augmentation of providence is limited to 2 times. Take all the sects with the black Celestial Luck Banner as an example. If the spiritual chi absorbed by an itinerant cultivator is 1, then the spiritual chi of a lower-class sect is 4. Together with the double providence, it's actually 6 times that of an itinerant cultivator. In this case, 1 year of cultivation is equivalent to 6 years of cultivation for an itinerant cultivator. After that, the middle-class sects have 4 times the spiritual chi, which is 16 times that of an itinerant cultivator. Together with the double providence, it's 18 times. In other words, a middle-class sect's cultivation speed is 3 times that of a lower-class sect. It's 18 times that of an itinerant cultivator. Once Little Fatty said this, Yunyang understood everything at once and could not help but be shocked. Don't be in a hurry to be shocked. The upper-class sects of a higher class have the silver Celestial Luck Banner, which is 10 times the spiritual chi atmosphere and 2 times the providence. 10 times the spiritual chi is 1,024 times. Together with the double providence, it's 1,026 times. In other words, 1 day of cultivation in an upper-class sect is equivalent to more than 3 years of cultivation for an itinerant cultivator. It's 7 times that of a middle-class sect and more than 200 times that of a lower-class sect. Yunyang's eyes widened as he listened to this. Was there such a thing in this world? Did this not mean that cultivating in an upper-class sect was equivalent to ascending to heaven in a single bound? Was there still a way for itinerant cultivators to survive in this bound of universe? Little Fatty said, this is only the upper-class, middle-class and lower-class sects. Only 3 of the Celestial Luck Banners. Above them are the gold Celestial Luck Banners and the amethyst Celestial Luck Banners. The gold Celestial Luck Banners have 16 times the spiritual chi while the amethyst Celestial Luck Banners have 60 times. As for the specific amount of spiritual chi, you'll have to calculate it yourself. It's said that the cultivation base of a disciple who possesses the amethyst Celestial Luck Banner in a day of cultivation is no different from a disciple of a lower-class sect cultivating for 100 years if calculated in multiples. Although it varies from person to person and depending on their aptitude, and the number of talented disciples in any sect is very small, but, with this kind of support, even the most useless disciple in a high-grade sect is more outstanding and powerful than the most talented disciple in a low-grade sect. Compared to the sects and schools, The aristocratic families who can possess the celestial luck banner are relatively limited. Of course, there are also some super aristocratic families that have stood strong for a long time who possess the celestial luck banner, and their grade is not low either. However, most of these so-called aristocratic families only attach themselves to a certain sect and become its vassal, cultivating with the power of the celestial luck banner. Little fatty Chen Duo sighed and said, "This is also the fundamental reason why it's hard for a poor family to produce a noble son in the bound of universe now. This is also the fundamental reason why the martial world is filled with sects and schools, aristocratic families, the so-called one-legged bandits and the so-called martial world itinerant cultivators are becoming rarer and rarer." The general trend had basically been drawn. The setting of the celestial luck banner had been considered for a long time. Finally, it was decided to use it. Perhaps it was a little exaggerated, but his personal opinion was actually the same as in modern society. Some people were born to a height that ordinary people could not achieve even if they worked hard for 3 lifetimes. In this aspect, it was very similar to the celestial luck banner. The celestial luck banner could still be fought for, but... Chapter 887. Yin Yang sighed. That's right. If this goes on, it'll be hard for the poor to have a son. At the end of the day, it's just because of the huge disparity in the distribution of spiritual chi in this world, the little fatty chuckled. Think about it. Even if you're a peerless genius and have a suitable and profound cultivation method, you'll have to cultivate for 100 years, and you won't even be able to cultivate as fast as those top sects in a day. How are you going to compete with them? You can only join a sect because of the situation. Only then can you improve further. However, it's not easy to join a sect, especially those big ones. The path of cultivation is difficult. It's not just a saying. Yun Yang's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. An ordinary cultivator's entire life could only be equal to a day of a super sect's disciple. How could they compare? According to Little Fatty, it wasn't nearly impossible to conquer the bound of universe single-handedly. In fact, it was absolutely impossible. Just as Yun Yang's heart was haunted by negative emotions, Fatty continued, those who possess the amethyst celestial luck banner and the golden celestial luck banner basically don't roam the martial world. Even if they do, 99% of them won't reveal their identity. After all, it's too much of a bully to compete or fight with others with their background and ability. However, those who possess the black, green and silver colors are enough to look down on their peers and look askance at rogue cultivators in the martial world. Chen Duoduo's chubby face was radiant as he talked about these things. Speaking of which, Yun Yang was lucky. If it had been someone else who knew about these things, they might not have been as knowledgeable as Little Fatty, who was able to understand the crux of the matter in such an orderly manner, even if it had been someone else. Although Chen Duoduo's cultivation base was nothing in Yun Yang's eyes, he was very familiar with the things that Yun Yang desperately wanted to know. He was so knowledgeable that even Yun Yang was impressed by him. Perhaps this was the root cause of his low cultivation base and limited combat power. Yun Yang came to this conclusion. The martial world of the bound of universe is ruled by 4 forces on the surface. The 9 states and 4 seas are divided into 4 regions. The place we are in now is under the jurisdiction of one of the 4 palaces of the Eastern Celestial Palace, the Sacred Heart Palace. The other 3 palaces of the Eastern Celestial Palace are Saint Origin Palace, Saint Soul Palace and Saint God Palace. The 4 great powers are the Xiao Yao Palace, the Eastern Heavenly Palace, the Western Holy Palace and the Northern Devil Palace. Among them, the Eastern Heavenly Palace is ranked second. It was only inferior to the Xiao Yao Palace of the monster race. The reason why Xiao Yao Palace is the leader of the Elemental Gathering Palace is partly because the Demon King is the ruler of the world and his power is unparalleled. Secondly, the 12 Demon Kings and 36 Demon Generals under him are all tyrannical beings that can move unhindered in the world. Few can match them. After that, Chen Duo began to introduce the territories of the 4 major forces one by one, as well as the unique characteristics of their individual strengths. He went on and on one after another. Just the introduction of the Eastern Celestial Palace alone took him a good 4 hours. It seemed like he was far from done, and this was just the tip of the iceberg. Yun Yang, on the other hand, was not the least bit anxious. He listened attentively throughout the entire process and memorized them carefully, committing them to memory. Everything that he had obtained today would be things that he could use to roam the Shenhuang world in the future. The more detailed he knew, the better. He did not mind Little Fatty's nagging at all. To Yun Yang, the more nagging and detailed, the better. Actually, as the top forces in the Shenhuang world, Other than the lower and middle level sects who are still active, the higher level cultivators have long been disdainful of roaming the martial world. It's too shameful. After a long while, Little Fatty finally finished talking about the four forces. It was as if Little Fatty had ended the conversation. Yin-Yang could not help choking. F***ck, they don't even roam the martial world anymore, but King talked excitedly from night to day. At the same time, there was a lingering shock in Yin-Yang's heart. Little Fatty's words seemed to have another layer of meaning. Those high-level cultivators who did not roam the martial world. Even if they were disdainful, even if they were shameful, this was not the main point. Instead, where did they roam? Such cultivators, such high-level existences, would never hide, and it was impossible for their cultivation journey to stop. The true meaning of not roaming the martial world had another meaning instead. It should be that they had other experiences to train in. Such a place could not be compared to the ordinary martial world. Under the four forces, the cultivators of the same level from the four temples of the Eastern Celestial Palace basically don't roam the martial world anymore. Everyone knows that they won't really disappear from the world. Even if they still roam the martial world, as long as they don't reveal their identity, who can recognize them? So, on the surface, it's the martial world sects fighting for supremacy. Under each temple there are 3 upper-class sects, 6 middle-class sects and 9 lower-class sections. These sects are all qualified to possess the Celestial Luck Banner. Below them are the lower-class sects, rogue cultivators and various noble families. They're competing against each other, fighting for the chance to rise. At this moment, there was a hint of sadness in Little Fatty's voice. The sudden sigh made Yun-Yang take a second look at him. What are you sighing about? What exactly does the chance to rise refer to? Asked Yun-Yang. The ownership of the Celestial Luck Banner. Little Fatty Chen Duo said, the location of the Celestial Luck Banner isn't fixed. It can be snatched. When a sect reaches a certain level, it can issue a challenge to a sect with the Celestial Luck Banner. As long as it wins the challenge, it can replace the original sect and obtain the Celestial Luck Banner. As for the defeated sect, it will naturally fall due to the loss and won't be able to recover. This is also the last path to heaven that the person who created the Celestial Luck Banner left for the bottommost cultivators, the path of advancement. Yun-Yang's eyes lit up when he heard this. Stroking his chin, he murmured, there's actually such a thing? Interesting. Looking at Yun-Yang's expression, Chen Duo scoffed and said, interesting? Do you think this path is easy to walk? It's a one-log bridge, a path of no return. There are 4 temples under the East Celestial Palace. Under each temple there are only 3 upper-class sects, 6 middle-class sects and 9 lower-class sects. But do you know how many other sects without Celestial Luck Banners there are? How many forces and how many people want to cross this one-log bridge? Yin-Yang asked, how many? Could it be that there are hundreds of sects, 1 in 100? 1 in 100? Under each temple, the most conservative estimate, there must be 30 to 20,000 sects. Fatty said lightly, well, that's about it. Plus, it's gangs, sects and aristocratic families. There's a total of this number, but it's still not enough to pick 1 out of 100. Do you think it's more interesting now? Yun-Yang shuddered, not having the time to respond to Little Fatty's mocking tone. 30 to 20,000 forces, to fight for 9 lower-class Celestial Luck Banners? What kind of ratio was this? Chapter 888. What's more, up until now, since the rule of seizing the Celestial Luck Banner was established, the number of sects that managed to capture the flag is less than 100. Fatty paused and continued, up until now it refers to hundreds of thousands of years. Less than 100 sects have succeeded. Don't you find it interesting? Cough cough cough. Yun-Yang coughed again, unable to retort. You're surprised? Do you know how many lower-class sects have risen from the middle class to the middle class and successfully fought against them? Fatty spoke with an unusually indifferent expression as he looked at Yun-Yang from the corner of his eyes. Yun-Yang was discouraged, but he refused to show weakness. How many? I've forgotten whether it's 8 or 9, but it's definitely less than 10. Fatty licked his lips and continued, also, how many middle-class sects have risen to the upper class? I remember this very clearly. For so many years there have only been 2, only 2. Yun-Yang rolled his eyes and said, then how many upper-class sects have risen to palace level? Fatty bared his teeth. Ah, you're really bold. Upper-class sects have risen to palace level? You're indeed an ascended expert. You're far-sighted to think so far ahead. I'm sorry, this young brother's knowledge is really limited. Anyway, from what I know, there's only one. He smiled and continued, "There's not one either." When he mentioned the words ascended expert, there was a hint of sarcasm. Yun-Yang was completely silent, even his gaze left little Fatty. Fatty was still looking at Yun-Yang from the corner of his eyes. Then he stretched his legs and lay down comfortably on the ground. Resting his head on his hands, he said as if he was sleep-talking, "Brother, it's really not that I want to discourage you. You've just ascended and your cultivation base is already at honor level 3. Not to mention that you're already invincible in your original realm, an unprecedented honor expert. You're also a rare genius in the bound of universe. However, in this bound of universe, it's never just because you're a genius that you can go far and your cultivation base will always be high. If your luck isn't good, you'll probably end up like this for the rest of your life. Who knows when you'll meet a tough opponent who'll kill you. If your luck is slightly better, you can join an aristocratic family attached to a lower-class sect and enjoy half of the celestial luck banner. Don't look down on it, that's really good luck. If you're especially lucky, you can win the favor of someone in a lower-class sect or make friends with them and become a disciple of a lower-class sect. Of course, if you're really lucky, there's also a slight chance that you can directly become a disciple of a middle-class sect. However, this chance is really similar to a meteor falling from the sky hitting your buttocks and blocking your buttocks without hurting you. As for the upper-class sects and above, those are things that you can't even dream of. You'd better not be delusional, lest you shed tears in vain after a beautiful dream. Right, with your talent and your current cultivation base and ability, you can try to make a move on the super aristocratic families. Not only are there very few super aristocratic families in this world, they rarely show themselves and aren't something that ordinary martial artists can come into contact with. Let this young brother say something even better. There are thousands and thousands of cultivation methods in this world. There's nothing you can't think of and nothing you can't get your hands on. It's a pity that most of them are in the hands of sects and aristocratic families. There are almost no resources in the martial world. Do you understand now? The real situation in the bound of universe is actually just a few numbers. Rogue cultivators have no resources. Do you feel that your future is bleak after understanding all this? That there's no hope at all? Little Fatty Chen Duo attacked Yun-Yang relentlessly, his eyes gleaming with schadenfreude. Is there only despair and helplessness left? Yun-Yang narrowed his eyes and nodded slowly. You're right. I really only have one feeling now. What feeling? Can you share it? I feel that I should thank you properly now and help you loosen your bones. With a pained cry, Yun-Yang pounced on him, punching and kicking him. Little Fatty's joy turned to sorrow as he was taught a harsh lesson by an unscrupulous person. Even when he begged for mercy, it was to no avail. In just a moment his face was swollen like a pig's. After a while Yun-Yang looked over, refreshed. Go on. My cheeks hurt, I can't speak. Is it that serious? Shall I rub it for you? No need. I'm just saying. I'll talk now. Little Fatty talked about everything in detail for 2 days and 2 nights, spitting saliva everywhere. He talked about the rules of every industry in the bound of universe, the division of forces, sects, cultivation bases, and the beginning and end of the celestial luck banner, especially the methods of obtaining the celestial luck banner, as well as the successful examples. The more Yun-Yang listened, the more he felt that Little Fatty was a talent. A real talent. There was so much information. It wouldn't be surprising if a cultivator with a certain level of achievement knew about it. However, there weren't many who were as familiar with it as Little Fatty did. Furthermore, he knew everything clearly and was extremely familiar with it. Not everyone had such eloquence and organizing skills. By the time Yun-Yang finished listening, it was already the wee hours of the 3rd day. Yun-Yang did not feel the slightest bit sleepy. Sitting at the entrance of the cave, he looked at the sky that was starting to brighten as he pondered quietly. Little Fatty, who had also stayed up for a few days, peeked at Yun-Yang's expression with reddened eyes. Other than the redness in his eyes, there was also a strong sense of interest and hope. He guessed that Yun-Yang was thinking about how he would go on in the bound of universe in the future. Chen Duo was filled with curiosity. How did this pretty boy in front of him plan to go on? The only thing he could be sure of was that no matter which path Yun-Yang chose, it would not be an easy one. The sky gradually brightened. The dew on the leaves of the few stalks of grass at the entrance of the cave glimmered. Yun-Yang pondered in silence like an old monk in meditation. Little Fatty finally could not hold it in anymore. He got up carefully and said, Boss, what do you plan to do? This young brother is untalented, but I'm willing to serve you. Yun-Yang was not at all surprised by Little Fatty's reaction. He had long seen that this child had nowhere to go and his future was bleak. Following him was, in fact, the best way out now. Otherwise, he would not have introduced him so diligently. It was as if he was afraid that he would be rash and inadvertently violate some law of heaven. You mentioned the black celestial luck banner, green, silver, gold, purple, but these are only the 5th class. Didn't you say there's a total of 6? There's the supreme banner at the end, but that's not something ordinary people know. Everyone knows that there is one, but no one knows what it is exactly. I see. Yun-Yang pondered and returned to the topic at hand. What do you want me to do? When he asked this, Yun-Yang's heart was as calm as ice. He had made up his mind. What does everyone want Yun-Yang to do? Chapter 889. Fatty rolled his eyes and said, "How would I know what you should do? I only want to ask you now, boss, for this period of time, let's team up. Ever since I saw you, I felt a sense of familiarity and affinity." What? Team up? You feel a sense of familiarity? Affinity and affinity? Yun-Yang turned to look at him, his eyes unusually wide. Although he had already expected this person to submit to him, what kind of words did he utter? Could he be any more shameless? Are you addicted to me hitting you? Fatty looked a little bashful. Actually, I'm just a little lonely. I want to find a companion. Yun-Yang almost laughed out loud. Lonely? Why don't you say you're empty, lonely, and cold? Your father has a strong arm, but I can't give it to you. You're afraid, aren't you? Afraid that you'll be killed at any time if you're alone? Yun-Yang looked at Fatty teasingly. Following me is actually finding a bodyguard by your side? Not only can you talk to relieve your loneliness and emptiness, you can also be protected and supported during critical moments? Fatty blushed. This isn't embarrassing, is it? Yun-Yang smiled and said in a low voice, "Of course not." Fatty cheered and said, "Boss, you've just come up anyway. Even with my explanation, you've never put it into practice. You know how it is, but you don't know why. Why don't you team up with me? At least, you'll have a guide who knows everything, won't you?" Yun-Yang nodded. "What you said makes a lot of sense. I agree wholeheartedly. Very well. Alright, I'll team up with you." When little Fatty heard that, his brows immediately danced and his face beamed with joy. "Fatty, your family background isn't simple either, is it?" Yun-Yang asked. His words seemed to touch upon the little Fatty's sore spot. His expression, which had just brightened up, immediately darkened again. He sighed silently and said, "You're right, but it's a pity that my family is no longer my family. My father was the patriarch, but he passed away last year and passed on to second uncle. Just 3 months ago, second uncle expelled me from the family and forcibly deprived me of the celestial luck banner and spirit vein. Now, I'm just a rogue cultivator in the pugilistic world." At this point, little Fatty's face was filled with malevolence as his muscles spasmed. She took a few deep breaths and held back her tears as she said slowly, "Not only am I homeless now, but I also have nowhere to stay. The reason I'm trying so hard to get the rhymed orchid is because I want to repair my spirit meridians, but even if it's repaired, I won't be able to enjoy the benefits of the clan's celestial luck banner." He laughed bitterly and said, "To be honest, after buying the myriad rhymed orchid, I'm only left with less than 100 spirit jades. Apart from that, I also have a small amount of gold medicinal pills. Everything else is gone. When he chased me out of the house that day, he didn't even let me return to my own courtyard to tidy up." Yun-Yang was silent for a moment before he said, "I see." He had always felt that this little Fatty's actions were too extreme. He was like a bird that was frightened by the mere twang of a bowstring rootless duckweed, and had no sense of security at all. So this was the reason why he was so passionate towards a complete stranger like him. It seemed that little Fatty was not lying when he said that he was lonely. However, there were other factors: loneliness, hatred, helplessness, and despair without anyone to rely on. That was barely enough. It was also because of this reason that he had stuck himself to Yun-Yang like a plaster after confirming that Yun-Yang was not a bad person, at least not someone with ulterior motives towards him. He did not even care that he had just ascended and did not know anything, nor did he have any foundation. It was all because he was like a traveler in an icy world, desperate to find another person to warm himself up with. It had nothing to do with any other utilitarian thoughts. All right. Now is not the time to be melancholic. Tell me quickly, where is the place to register a sect?" Yun-Yang stood up and asked faintly. Little Fatty's eyes glowed brilliantly as his voice trembled slightly. "Boss, are you sure you want to choose this path?" The path forward that Yun-Yang had revealed could be said to be the most difficult path to choose in all cultivation paths. Yun Yang looked at the sky and said softly, I don't want to live under someone else's roof, I don't want to be someone's slave. At least, I have to try a path of freedom before I'm completely hopeless. Yun Yang said that he would try, but an unwavering gleam flashed across his eyes. It might be much easier to attach to a sect or a noble family, and it would not be difficult for him to find one with his current cultivation base and ability. However, once he did so, he would unknowingly have the thought of attaching to someone else for safety. It would basically be the fall of the strong's heart. From then on, no matter how great the achievement was, there would always be a hindrance in the bottom of his heart. At least Yun Yang could be sure of one thing: it was absolutely difficult to reach the pinnacle of this world. He would not do things for others. In fact, Yun Yang had such a plan ever since he heard about the Celestial Luck Banner. He would rely on himself and seize it by himself. If it were not for the fact that the Celestial Luck Banner was a unique item in this world, Yun Yang was even confident of creating it. Yun Yang did not deny that the Celestial Luck Banner was the cornerstone of this world's cultivators and that it was a rare divine item, but did he lack the items that could be called divine items? Whether it was Emi, the divine edge, or the endless divine art, they were all rare divine items. Yun Yang was confident that what he had would not pale in comparison to the so-called Celestial Luck Banner. I have one last question, Yun Yang said. Love? The little fatty answered subconsciously. What did you say? Yun Yang was bewildered by little fatty's answer. What kind of answer was that? What was it? Little fatty came to his senses and quickly made up for it. What question did I ask? Where did this Celestial Luck Banner come from? This thing is so mystical, it must have an extraordinary origin. Yun Yang said in a low voice. The Celestial Luck Banner, as the name suggests, is a treasure bestowed by the heavens. Little fatty was once again confused by Yun Yang's question, only giving an illusory answer after a while. Bestowed by the heavens? If the Celestial Luck Banner is bestowed by the heavens, then it should be a predetermined number. However, when a sect snatches another sect's Celestial Luck Banner, it's obviously obtained by force through its own strength. How can it be bestowed by the heavens? Isn't the saying that it's bestowed by the heavens a lie? Yun Yang said. Chapter 890. Yun Yang did not interrupt and waited for little fatty to continue, obviously looking forward to the origin of the Celestial Luck Banner. It's been said that the number of Celestial Luck Banners is also fixed. When the Celestial Luck Banner appeared, there were a total of 9,999 banners in the world. No matter when, the total number of Celestial Luck Banners will not change. Be it natural or man-made disasters, intentional or unintentional, they will not truly destroy the Celestial Luck Banner. Up to this day, the Celestial Luck Banners all have their own owners. It's impossible for the banner bearers to give them up voluntarily. Later on, if they want it, they can only take it by force. Little fatty pondered for a long time before saying, to me the Celestial Luck Banner is actually like the materialization of an official's seal in the secular world. You'll be treated according to your position. If you don't reach that position, you won't be treated like this. To be more specific, it's like a 7th-class county magistrate and a provincial governor in a novel. The salary between the two must be very different, right? The difference in power is like heaven and earth. The area under their jurisdiction is also like heaven and earth. The third party's attitude towards them will be quite different, won't it? Just tell me the difference directly. Yun Yang was exasperated. Do I need you to tell me this? I come from that kind of world. An analogy would be more concrete. Qian Duo said, for a person to become a county magistrate, he needs to first learn knowledge, temper, take exams, and be recognized by the superiors. Only then can he accept the appointment and wield power. But there are only so many official positions. If you come to take up the post, what will the county magistrate you replace do? Will he resign? Will he be dismissed? Will he be prosecuted? Or will he be killed? It all depends on the outcome of the game between you and him. That's all. Yun Yang said faintly, it doesn't have to be so extreme. It's not impossible for the replaced to leave because of a promotion. Little fatty was stunned for a moment before he finally said dejectedly, Boss, your idea is unconventional and meaningful, but it's unrealistic and difficult to implement because there's no possibility of promotion with the Celestial Luck Banner. Yun Yang's interest grew as he listened. Let's put aside the question of promotion for now. That's still far away. Just tell me about the initial pros and cons of getting the Celestial Luck Banner, as well as the direction of application. The little fatty pondered for a while again. After deliberating over his words, he said, The overall situation seems to be settled after obtaining the Celestial Luck Banner, but there are still many loose ends to deal with. It's not something that can be done once and for all. This ensures absolute fairness, and there's rarely any favoritism or fraud. Yun Yang grinned. This may not be accurate. What if the challenger defeats any of the top 3 sects? Where would you find 3 assessment sects? Little Fatty choked, grumbling inwardly, "You're so careless. If the lower-class sects aren't qualified for the assessment, there's still the middle-class sections. However, the possibility of this is very small, and it's only passed down in regulations and legends. At least, I've never heard of it." Yun Yang asked, "Are casualties allowed in such an assessment?" "No." Martial artists strive for victory by raising their hands and not giving in, showing no mercy on the spot. The difference of a single move can turn the tide of the battle. However, in the vast majority of approved battles, there would be no casualties. This is because those who die in this battle will come back to life under the Golden Radiance banner. Yun Yang's jaw almost dropped. There's such a thing? Resurrection of the dead? Isn't this a joke? Do you think that the Golden Radiance Celestial Luck Banner's power is only limited to increasing one's cultivation base? Its power is far beyond our imagination. Of course, even if one can be resurrected, it doesn't mean that there won't be any enmity. Many enmities arise from this. After all, after dying once, it's inevitable that one will hold a grudge against the one who killed him. Little Fatty chuckled coldly. Competition has never been forbidden between sects, much less killing and vengeance. Chen Duoduo said, "All the sects that have obtained the Celestial Luck Banner dare not relax for even a moment in their self-cultivation. They have to guard against the attacks of those red-eyed rogue sects and prepare for the annual ranking competition. Many of the sects that rank outside the top 3 are constantly changing. After all, there are as many sects without Celestial Luck Banners as there is an ocean. While there is a gap between rogue cultivators and the disciples of sects that have lower-class Celestial Luck Banners, it's not impossible to catch up. Therefore, everyone works hard in their cultivation, no one dares to be careless." As if he had guessed Yun Yang's thoughts, Little Fatty said, "Those who die in the ranking competition won't be resurrected. The Golden Radiance Banner won't pay attention to other battles that don't involve the Celestial Luck Banner." Yun Yang coughed and asked, "If the lower-class sect succeeds in the challenge, for example, if the top sect in the lower 9 classes were to be promoted to a middle-class sect, then the lower 9 classes would be reduced to 8. What would happen if there's an empty spot?" "I've never heard of such a thing before. Although there should be such an example before, there's no specific news about it, so no one knows the inside story. The only thing that's certain is that the new replacement, no matter how it's done, is definitely related to the battle." Yun Yang had only listened briefly, but he immediately understood the danger involved. There were only 9,999 Celestial Luck Banners in the entire bound of universe. As for the upper 4 classes, gold, silver, purple and green, rogue cultivator sects did not even dare to hope for them. Those sects could probably crush them to death just by plucking a strand of hair from their hands. Therefore, while there were 9,999 Celestial Luck Banners in name, only the lowest class ones were in circulation. As for those so-called low-ranked sects, the top 3 and even the top 6, they were all untouchable by the loose cultivators. At most, they could only compete for the last 3 sections. In other words, only the 9th sect had the highest chance of competing for it. 1 spot. On the other hand, how many rogue cultivator sects were there in the world that did not have a Celestial Luck Banner? More precisely, how many such sects were there under the jurisdiction of a palace? Fatty seemed to have mentioned just now that there were at least 20 to 30,000 of them. Yet there was only 1/9 place. Such a ratio was even more exaggerated and tragic than an army crossing a single plank bridge. Moreover, even if it was the last 9th-ranked sect, how could they not cultivate with all their might, knowing that they were in an awkward position? After all, they still had the help of the Celestial Luck Banner. After all, their cultivation speed was 6 times faster than rogue cultivators. How could they be pulled down so easily? Even an idiot would know that it was not easy. The so-called chance of promotion was still slim. The probability was less than 1 in 10,000. Chapter 891. Chen Duo, what do you plan to do next? Yun Yang asked the fatty. Lin Fan could not help but admit that this little fatty whom he had just met was truly a talent. He was a know-it-all and was familiar with the many stories of the Xinhuang world. Not only that, he was the type of person who knew more than most people. Although Yunyang had never met anyone else in the Bound of Universe, he could still come to this conclusion. How many official positions were there in a country that had conquered the Bound of Universe? Who would be able to name the duties of all these officials in one go? Perhaps there might be. However, in a place like the Bound of Universe where cultivators were the most important and the rest of the people were mediocre, it was hard to find them. Yet this fatty had the ability. Not only could he, but he could also figure out something new and draw inferences from it. This was a skill. And a great one at that. Coincidentally, this little fatty was at his wits' end and had nowhere to go, so Yunyang had the thought of taking him in as his subordinate. There was absolutely no possibility that someone would arrange for a spy to plot against him at this stage. He had just ascended and did not know anyone who would target him. Furthermore, he had no ulterior motives. How would the people in this realm know that he had something good on him? As for how to subdue the fatty, it was too easy. This fatty was afraid of death and cowardly. These 2 points were too easy for Yunyang to exploit. With just a raise of his hand and a glare, the fatty was immediately terrified. He did whatever he was told and was indescribably obedient. Based on this alone, where else could he find such an excellent subordinate? Whether the fatty was loyal or not was a hidden danger, but Yunyang believed in his charisma. When Bai Yixue had submitted to him in the past, he had been reluctant as well. Yet, under Yunyang's inspiration, he had still been completely subdued. With this precedent, there was no need to worry that the fatty would not submit to him sincerely in the future. My plan? The fatty wanted to cry in his heart. What plan can I have? I plan to follow you, but your thoughts are too crazy now. You're just a rogue cultivator who has just ascended. How are you going to feed me? At the very least, you have to let me understand your plan and what you're relying on. Only then can I carefully plan my next step. Yunyang said, my sect is still lacking a major domo. I have my eyes set on you and I think highly of you. Chen Duoduo rolled his eyes and said, where do you have a sect now? Yunyang replied, it will be built soon. This is a certainty. Chen Duoduo counted on his fingers. Manager? Seemed to be pretty good. It's just that, even if we were to establish a sect now, it would only be the 2 of us. Me being the chief manager sounds good, but who am I in charge of? Could the general manager still manage the sect master? But apart from the sect leader, I'm the only one left. Who cares about me? Was it humorous? What's the point of me being a steward? Chief steward, what a high position. What exactly are they in charge of? Chen Duoduo curled his lips. Since the chief is in charge of the sect's general affairs, he must first manage the sect's resources. Yunyang said lightly, the sect's wealth, resources and future transactions, these are all within the authority of the supervisor. Well, once little fatty heard the term, his eyes turned into light bulbs as saliva dripped from the corners of his mouth. He was practically drooling. Money? Little fatty's cheeks quivered, filled with longing and resentment. I love money the most. Yunyang squinted and said, love money? That's the easiest thing to do. I dare not boast about other things, but I'm quite wealthy. Little fatty shot him a doubtful gaze. You've just ascended? Even if you're impressive and confident in your original world, have you seen the Bound of Universe's resources? Do you know what's called wealth in this realm? You actually boast that you're wealthy. You're a great apothecary. Yunyang snorted and rolled his eyes looking at little fatty's doubtful face. Let's settle our business first and watch this big brother squash you to death with money. Quick, go register and establish a sect. This is the #1 priority right now. With little fatty leading the way, it only took them half a day to find the nearest city and enter the city with the bustling crowd. Isn't the Bound of Universe mainly made up of cultivators? Why are there so many ordinary people? Yunyang asked. With his knowledge, he could tell at a glance that while there were plenty of cultivators here, there were plenty of ordinary people as well. Cough, I've actually forgotten the most important rule. Chen Duoduo seemed to have thought of something when he heard that. His expression was extremely serious. It's these ordinary people who don't know martial arts and have no mystical chi. They're the biggest taboo in the Bound of Universe. Yunyang replied, huh? Where did this come from? What's the taboo? The Bound of Universe's first iron law, the first rule of heaven, is that cultivators are strictly forbidden to lay a hand on ordinary people. Those who violate this rule shall be punished with the death of their entire family. Little fatty Chen Duoduo enunciated each word in a solemn tone. Yunyang felt lightheaded. Strictly forbidden to lay a hand on ordinary people? Those who violate this rule shall be punished with the death of their entire family? How could it be considered as laying a hand? This concept was a little hard to understand. If you slapped him, it would be considered as laying a hand. If you killed someone, it would also be considered as laying a hand. Even if you took a stalk of vegetables from him, it would still be considered as laying a hand. Could such a small action be punished with the death of his entire family? Is there a more specific way of saying it? Like causing someone to be injured or killed? There must be some specific restrictions. Yin Yang asked. No. Qian Duo said, this is the first rule of heaven. It's completely unreasonable and indiscriminate. Even if an ordinary person scolds you, as long as you talk back and retaliate, you'll face the death of your entire family. There was once a cultivator who bought something in the market just because he gave a silver coin less. The vegetable seller was indignant and both parties quarreled. It wasn't that the cultivator didn't want to give enough money, but he didn't have much silver with him. His conscience was troubled. In the end, after such a quarrel, the high-level saint-level cultivator was struck to death by lightning when he returned home. Not a single one of his family members survived. Since then, when a cultivator goes out, gold and silver have become an indispensable part of the things they carry with them, regardless of whether they need it or not. It's precisely because they're afraid of encountering such a situation that they'll bring disaster upon themselves and their families when they die. At this moment, Yun Yang could only feel the thunder rumbling above his head. This rule was completely unreasonable and unreasonable. From the bottom of his heart, Yun Yang actually liked the existence of this rule. If it was possible, it would be best not to talk about cultivators bullying ordinary people. Not to mention other high-level cultivators, even with his current cultivation of venerable level, if he were to fight against ordinary people, it would not be a big problem for him to destroy a country all by himself. With the existence of such a heavenly rule, as long as there was a small opening in such a matter, it would be broken immediately. Treating everyone equally like this was the best way to protect the common people's interests. It was the most effective method of suppression. Yes, it did not matter if one was right or not. As long as one committed the offense, only death awaited him. In this way, who in this world would dare to offend it? If one did, death would be the only thing that awaited them. Not only that, it would be the death of their entire family. The person who made this rule is truly admirable. It looks sinister, but it has a profound meaning. It basically eliminates the possibility of many tragedies. Even the chances of taking advantage of loopholes are minuscule. It's difficult to operate. Chapter 892. This is the iron law of the bound of universe that has been passed down for tens of thousands of years. The fatty snorted. If you don't believe it, you can argue with an ordinary person. You'll know the pros and cons after you try. Yun Yang exploded at once. Why don't you try? This fatty had sores on his head and pus on the soles of his feet. This was no longer a joke, he was setting himself up for death. Both of them arrived at the registration office of the sections. Yun Yang finally experienced firsthand how intense and cruel the competition between the cultivators of the bound of universe was. Not to mention the schools that already existed, just these people before him that were packed so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. What were all these people? Just by looking at the people queuing here, there were more than a few hundred people. Did this not mean that there were hundreds of sects waiting to be built? And this was only what he saw before his eyes, a minute reflection of a certain hour in a day. Then, how many sects would be added to the bound of universe in a year? Yun Yang could not help feeling a little dizzy. You want to queue? Nonsense, you don't want to queue? Or are you? The fatty was disdainful. Are you trying to bribe me? Let me tell you, all these officials will have their entire families wiped out if they accept a bribe from a carrot. They don't even have to wait for them to return home, there will be lightning strikes immediately. Yun Yang realized that although there did not seem to be many administrative personnel in this realm, the rules that they had to abide by were really unimaginably strict. He wondered what kind of person it was back then to come up with these rules. Could it be that he was drunk, high or high? Otherwise, how could he be so different, fresh and refined, without the slightest bit of shyness? After queuing for about 4 hours, it was finally Yun Yang's turn. He finally managed to get in, but there was only a screen behind the official's desk. He could not even see the person handling the matter. Name: Yun Yang. Gender: male. Occupation: occupation? The sudden question baffled Yun Yang. The voice inside seemed to be surprised as well. You didn't choose an occupation? Yun Yang was dumbfounded. Choose an occupation? What class should I choose? Panting sounds could be heard from inside. You haven't even chosen your profession, and you've come here to create a sect? No one told me. Yun Yang mumbled. Then has anyone ever told you that you'll get hungry if you don't eat? Will you get thirsty if you don't drink? Will your stomach hurt if you can't poop? In serious cases, people will die. Yun Yang dared not continue the conversation, intending to flee. Come back. Yun Yang, who was already at the door, halted abruptly. He did not know if there were any special restrictions in this place, so it was better to be more orderly. What if he was disobedient and was struck by lightning? Why are you running? Where do you think you're going? Since you don't even know how to choose a profession, you definitely don't know the other procedures, right? Are you going to choose your class now? Yes. Then when you come back, I'll ask you something else and you'll run away. Do you know that what you're doing now is very stupid? Yun Yang felt extremely embarrassed. Ever since he started his career, he was often mentioned. The most common comment about him was supreme wit, the wisdom of the 9 supremes, being as intelligent as a demon, and so on and so forth. He had never thought that he would be called an idiot today. He even had to think that what the other party said was very reasonable and that he could not refute it. It was a brand new experience that he had never experienced before. Which realm did you actually ascend from, young man? You look rather smart, but you keep doing stupid things. How did you manage to cultivate to the bound of universe with that kind of brain of yours? Could it be that the realm you're in is exceptionally rich in spiritual qi and anyone can ascend? Or did you accidentally eat a mysterious spiritual ingredient that hasn't been seen for billions of years and achieve enlightenment overnight? Yun Yang felt like he was going crazy. What's inside this thing? How could there be such sarcasm? Even if what you said is the truth, I'm famous for my intelligence in the realm I'm born in. How could I be treated as a fool here? There was no one else like this. If the people of the Tianshan continent were to find out that their omnipotent, resourceful, far-sighted, and meticulous Supreme Cloud had been treated as a fool by someone else and had even been rendered speechless and speechless, how would they react? Yun Yang exited the room, exasperated, his face covered in dirt. Fatty? Are you King sincere? What's wrong? Vocation. You pig, how do you register for a sect without a vocation? Oh. Holy shit. You don't have a vocation? Nonsense. Yun Yang was so angry that he did not even want to speak. Little Fatty was also looking at him like he was looking at a weirdo. After a while, both of them walked out with their heads hung low. Not only were they covered in dirt, they looked like they were in dire straits. At the vocation register, Yun Yang had to queue for about 4 hours just like before. The sky was already turning dark when it was finally his turn. You're Yun Yang? Which Yun and which Yang? Yun as in white clouds? Yang as in the sun, or the ram as in the female sheep, or the triumphant Yang as in the exalted Yang? A sarcastic voice came from inside. Yun Yang was dumbfounded again. What the hell was this thing? Was he purposely showing off his knowledge with such a long speech? Cough, Yun as in white clouds, Yang as in the exalted Yang. Oh, what vocation do you want to choose? Let me tell you, a person can only choose 7 vocations in his life. Don't choose more, don't choose less. Once you've made up your mind, take big strides forward. If you choose wrongly, you'll be like this for the rest of your life. Do you understand? Understood. Choose then. With a swoosh, a few pieces of paper were tossed out, filled with the names of various vocations. The first page was filled with legitimate professions such as farmers, chefs, tailors, merchants, dentists, shopkeepers, and even bailiffs, coroners, cooks, and other professions were listed. Of course, Yun Yang would not choose such professions. He skipped them and flipped to the second page. The first on the second page was an assassin while the second was a robber. The corners of Yun Yang's lips were twitching. In Tianshan continent, this was a trade that would result in the extermination of an entire family, but it was so open and above board here. Needless to say, he had to choose the first and the second. Swordsman, saberman, alright, he could choose both as well. Concealed weapons? He had to choose this as well. Wait, this was already 5. The person just said that he could only choose 7. Thinking of this, Yun Yang quickly asked, Sir, does it mean that I can't fight with other weapons if I choose to be a swordsman? You can use your hands and feet. Yun Yang was speechless. He wanted to curse a million times. You've chosen to be a swordsman, what else do you want? Don't tell me that you, a swordsman, don't fight with your sword and instead want to stink others to death? The voice came from inside. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.